kids, it's Wildlife Wednesday, so I'm gonna teach you about the shrike. So the shrike's a bird, right? Looks like this. Cute, right? Wrong. Turns out you're gazing into the eyes of a cold-blooded psychopath. Don't believe me? Let me tell you about it. First off, notice how the name shrike is like a combination of shit and spike. And already you've got a pretty good concept of what the shrike's all about. So this is how it goes. Shrike sees prey. Shrike uses its foot spikes to grab the prey. Prey says shit. Shrike finds another spike. Shrike fucking impales its prey on the spike. Prey says shit. Shrike eats prey off of spike like some kind of hell kebab. Shrike turns prey into shit. And finally, Shrike uses the spike to clean the shit off its asshole. And the circle of life continues. Still don't believe me? Here's a picture. If that isn't some Silence of the Lambs shit, I don't know what is. I can only imagine what it does after it gets home.
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me. I'd fuck me hard.
Thankfully, the shrike is small enough to fit in the palm of the hand, so we're safe for now. As long as there aren't any teacup poodle conventions in town. However, the impalement is considered basic tool use, which is a sign of higher level cognitive thinking in animals. So while we're in the clear now, this guy could get even more devious as evolution progresses. 1,000 years from now, they're figuring out how to sprinkle spikes on the road to pop tires.
Watch where you walking.
Also, who knows how the shrike's sociopathic DNA could be manipulated? Imagine like a bunch of Al-Qaeda biologists weaponizing the shrike. We will breed it with their national bird. Those American pig dogs will never see it coming. But Abdul, what will we call this new creature? The bald shingle. And a hop, skip, and a jump later, and suddenly you've got kindergartners impaled on stop signs. Birdemic 3, should you use my idea, I expect compensation. So when you go to bed tonight, kids, make sure to lock your windows. Or else you might wake up with a spike up your anus and bird shit smeared on the walls.
Kids, can I tell you a secret? Come here. Closer. Nuclear energy? It's not a bad thing.
Sure, 30 years ago, things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island were certainly something to worry about. Today, however, it's a different story. Let me tell you kids about thorium. Thorium is uranium's neighbor, just 2 houses down. He's a lot like uranium, just he's a lot more chill. Uranium's the type to do a half-assed job during the day and spend every night doing Jaeger bombs and blasting Kendrick Lamar, you know the type. Thorium, on the other hand, is more career-oriented, and at the end of the day, he's cool with just watching Netflix, eating Ben & Jerry's. Let me walk you through all the steps of nuclear power, and you'll see why thorium is so great. Let's start with mining. So when somebody doesn't feel like getting out of bed, they'll, you know, whine and moan and roll over. Likewise, when uranium doesn't want to get out of bed, he releases deadly cancer-inducing radon gas. This means workers have to put up expensive ventilation systems just to, you know, not die. Thorium's chill. You go to wake him up, he understands he's got a job to do. Goes without a fuss. And even when you do get uranium up, like the lazy bastard he is, he has much less concentration in his ore compared to thorium, so more work has to be done just to get the same amount of material. The Earth's crust also has much more thorium in total than uranium, about 3 times as much. So you got your ore, and you've extracted it. Ready for work, right? Wrong. You see, natural uranium mainly consists of 2 different isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-238. 238 kinda sucks at life, so uranium has to undergo enrichment to up its concentration of 235. Uranium's kinda like that kid with ADHD, right? You got him in the building, but you still gotta give him his own little room and a couple Ritalin before he starts doing anything productive. That's expensive. Thorium, on the other hand, look at him. He's got his sneakers laced, glasses on, he's ready to go. No enrichment needed. Finally, you're ready to make some power. This part's important, kids, pay attention. So this is where the biggest difference between uranium and thorium comes in. You see, uranium is fissile, whereas thorium is fertile. This means uranium can do his job all by himself, just doing his thing all on his own, whereas thorium's kind of a cripple. He needs a little bit of someone else just to give him the push he needs to start releasing energy. This might sound like a bad thing, but if you think about it, it's a lot safer. If you've got your power production process started, and shit suddenly hits the fan, uranium's just gonna keep going. You can try to move him around, cool him down or whatever, but at the end of the day, this man's gonna be swinging, and it's not gonna be a good day for anyone. Thorium, he's only got one leg. Piss him off, he takes a swing at you. Just push him over, you're good. Please note, Salmonella Academy does not condone pushing cripples. And that's what thorium reactors do. They allow the barely radioactive liquid thorium to drain away from its helper in the event of an accident, so there's no way for things to escalate. Much safer. But while the process for thorium is better, most of the time people care more about the results. Well, it just so happens thorium is pimpin' in that regard as well. CERN estimates that 1 ton of thorium is capable of producing as much energy as 200 tons of uranium. That's a lot. To compare, that's also equivalent to 3.5 million tons of coal. But let's talk about byproducts. Thorium, being as pure as it is compared even to enriched uranium, produces about 100 times less nuclear waste. So whereas we might not have as many X-Men, that also means much less work has to be done to dispose of the material. Additionally, it's very difficult to make a nuclear weapon out of thorium, since it can't do much on its own. The only thing that's really weaponizable about thorium plants is that little bit of helper material I talked about earlier. But overall, that's a pretty minuscule amount. That means we can feel a lot better about plopping these plants down in places like Iran. So kids, you heard it here first. Thorium is the future. Powerful, clean, reliable, and if things go wrong at the end of the day, you can still kick its ass.
Kids, remember Neanderthals? Me neither, cause they're dead. Some say they went extinct because of out-competition by Homo sapiens, but personally, I don't subscribe to that notion. I believe that they went extinct primarily because they interbred with early humans, not because they were inferior survivors. Now, I could ramble on for a couple of hours about the genetic and archaeological evidence for this, but modern experts have already run those points into the ground. Now, instead, I want to bring something totally new to the table that I thought of myself. I call it the sexy Neanderthal theory. Okay, hear me out. From a modern day point of view, this all sounds ridiculous, right? If someone came up to you asking if you wanted to reproduce with a Neanderthal, you'd say no. That's disgusting. Who are you? This is a mall. Where is security? But that's just what society has taught you to believe. It doesn't really reflect the true animal within you. Don't believe me? Take a look at this sculpture. Gross, right? Well, guess what? Cavemen used to whack off to that. They thought it was great. So we're gonna have to put away all of our deeply rooted cultural ideations for a second, and instead look at things from a purely biological perspective. First, I gotta learn y'all a thing or two about sexual selection. There are two main types of sexual selection. There's intrasexual selection, where members of the same sex compete for dominance, and intersexual selection, where members of one sex are intentionally choosy about who they mate with. Now, most of these are done by most animals to some degree, but with humans and most other mammals, there's a bit of an asymmetry in how either sex performs its selection. Namely, males tend to focus more on intrasexual selection, while females prioritize intersexual selection. This isn't just me stereotyping, I swear. There's actually an evolutionary reason for this. See, whereas males barely invest anything at all into mating in the absence of monogamous culture, childbearing is a huge deal to females, using up a lot of resources, so it only makes sense that males would want to be more promiscuous and females more selective. So to recap, The Bachelorette, that's an accurate portrayal of our most basic instincts. On the other hand, if The Bachelor were to be done with a bunch of cavemen, there wouldn't be this season-long show. Just a 5-hour special where The Bachelor bangs every contestant at once, which, in all fairness, would still be higher quality entertainment than the show we have now. Anyway, what's all this got to do with Neanderthals, you ask? Well, it just so happens the male Neanderthal's morphology makes it so that they would be able to outman the male Homo sapiens, both intrasexually and intersexually. For one, their thick bones and heavy joints suggest that they had way more muscle mass than humans of the day, putting them at a huge advantage both in asserting dominance and in appearing attractive. Secondly, their facial features exaggerate all the characteristics that makes a face appear male in humans, with square, well-defined jaws and heavy brow lines, further increasing their appeal to human females. Broad shoulders, that's hot. Also, their large chest cavities and broad nasal passages would make it so that their vocalizations would be much louder than humans, adding still to their intimidation factor. So basically, when the male Neanderthals strut into a human village, they'd be guaranteed Casanovae, ensuring that they would interbreed. But what about the Neanderthal females, you ask? If the men are more manly by default, surely the women would conversely be more man-ish. One would think that this homeliness would counteract the reproductive success of their male counterparts, but this is where that whole sexual asymmetry thing comes in. Cause whereas the human females would be selective towards the Neanderthals, the males don't really care. They're gonna take what they can get. Their women already waltzed off with those jabronis, they're lonely, what's a guy gotta lose? So in the end, when a population of humans meets a population of Neanderthals, there'd actually be an increased chance of genetic admixture, thereby making extinction through interbreeding seem like a much more plausible outcome for the Neanderthals. If the Nobel Committee is watching, I'd like my prize sent to this address.
Kids, when most people think of the Middle Ages, they think of them as being like humanity's dumb teenage years, where all we did was play harpsichord in our room and burn heretics with our friends. But that's not entirely true. In fact, I would argue that the medieval era saw just as much genius as any other period in time. It's just most of that genius went towards finding new and creative ways to brutally slaughter those you disagree with. Here's a few highlights. First, we'll talk about the werewolf. So, as you can imagine, medieval castles were not easy to break into. They were basically like those jungle gym things at Chuck E. Cheese's. Massive in size, intentionally confusing layout, security everywhere, and by the end of your visit, you'd probably end up with some kind of disease. So in order to help penetrate fortresses, medieval armies would often utilize siege weapons, one of the most popular of which was the trebuchet. Now this device is interesting enough on its own, but it gets better. So around 1300 AD, King Edward I of England was in the process of invading Scotland. However, one fortress, known as Stirling Castle, was giving him a lot of trouble. He laid siege to the building for many months without any real progress. Then one day, he woke up and had a revelation. Hey guys, listen, why are we wasting our time building all these regular-sized trebuchets when we could just build one giant one and call it a day? So that's what he did. This gargantuan war machine was known as the Werewolf and stood at around 6 stories tall. To give a bit of perspective, this is about as tall as King Kong was in his largest film depiction. So basically, picture a giant fucking ape launching boulders like they're baseballs, and you've got a pretty good idea of what the werewolf was capable of. It was so intimidating that when the Scots saw the English constructing the beast outside the castle, they immediately surrendered out of fear. But then Edward was like, ha, fuck that, I'm gonna test this bad boy out, and proceeded to take pot shots on the castle anyway. Another devious product of the Middle Ages was a flammable substance known as Greek fire. Contrary to popular belief, Greek fire was not invented by the ancient Greeks. Rick Riordan, you lying prick. It was actually invented in the 7th century AD by the Byzantines, who happened to inhabit Greece at the time. Historians still don't know exactly what it was made of, but they do know that it acted a lot like napalm, sticking to ships, sticking to people, even floating and continuing to burn on the surface of the water. The Byzantines also had these siphon-like tubes that they'd put on the front of their boats to pour Greek fire on the enemy, kinda like makeshift flamethrowers. These were retired pretty quickly though, mostly because when you put the words makeshift and flamethrower next to each other, you're bound to run into some problems eventually. Our next bright idea comes from a woman known as Olga of Kiev. So Olga was a princess who ruled the area around the capital of modern-day Ukraine from 945 to 963 AD. And she had quite a track record for being just a total badass. For example, the Drevlians, a tribe of people under Kiev's control, once sent 20 men to Kiev in order to convince Olga to marry their prince, under the pretense that if they did marry, the prince could claim her rule over Kiev. In response, she had all 20 of them buried alive. She then sent a letter to the prince saying she accepted his proposal, but she would need a bunch of his most distinguished governors to escort her on the journey. Once the men showed up, Olga was like, "Hey guys, long journey, huh? How'd you like to take a bath in this here bathhouse?" They were like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." "Okay, have fun, you guys." Man, it's like a sauna in here. It is a sauna, dipshit. You have a point. So long story short, this lady just did not give a heck. My favorite story about her starts with her besieging a Drevlian city that refused to pay tribute to her. The people in the city were already well aware of the type of rampaging that Olga was capable of, so they were already scared shitless. But when she showed up, she was like, alright, you know what guys, I'm gonna play nice. Just bring me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household and I'll be on my way. Okay. What are they for exactly? We're just hungry. I mean, we got some food too. We could just give... I'm sorry, did I fucking stutter? Alright, birds it is. Then, once the creatures were in Olga's hands, she had each of her soldiers tie a cloth-bound piece of sulfur to one of the birds' feet, which was then set alight. The birds were then released all at once, and when they flew back into the city, their nests acted like little piles of tinder, resulting in nearly every house in the entire city erupting in flames simultaneously. And while the whole place burned to the ground, Olga just sat and watched. By the way, it's worth mentioning that, after her death, Olga was canonized as a Catholic saint, presumably around the same time as Saint Tiffany, who went around pushing in the soft spots of babies, and Saint Jerry the Goat Fucker, who, as the name implies, fucked a lot of goats. In conclusion, pay your taxes. To my loyal subscribers, I'll see you in 3 months. I'm Sam and now, Kids, it's Food Friday. So today, I'm going to cover some of the deadly toxins found in your local produce section. Our first item is rhubarb. Now, the part of the rhubarb that you normally eat, the delicious red stalk, is virtually toxin-free, so no worries there. It's the greenery of the plant that's a cause for concern. The leaves of the rhubarb plant contain small amounts of oxalic acid, which is toxic to humans. And it's not a fun poison either, not one of those drift off to dreamland types. It will mess your day up, particularly in the digestive and renal areas. Some symptoms include breathing difficulty, burning of the mouth and throat, eye pain, bloody urine, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, convulsions, coma, and only then will you finally receive the sweet release of death. Of course, you'd need like a shitload of leaves to actually reach the lethality point, about 11 pounds for a 150-pound person. To put that into perspective, the average person eats around 4 pounds of food a day total, so to eat that weight of anything would be very difficult. Next up are almonds. So you know how they say cyanide reeks of almonds? Turns out it's actually the other way around. Sweet almonds, the type people normally eat, contain a bit of the toxin, just enough to get a whiff. After eating about a pound of them, you may experience some of the more mild symptoms which, while they're not exactly fun, aren't quite as bad as oxalic acid. In order for the poison to actually be deadly, you would have to eat around 4 pounds of almonds in the course of a couple hours. Considering that's the total food intake daily for an average person, and that you would be vomiting, cramping, and hyperventilating the whole time, it'd be hard to pull off. Next are apple seeds. Most of you are probably familiar with this one. Apple seeds contain cyanogenic glycosides, which are materials that produce cyanide once they enter the digestive system. These chemicals also have a significant presence in a whole menagerie of other produce items, but out of all of these, apple seeds will give you the most bang for your buck as far as potency goes. You would only need around 3.5 ounces of the seeds to do yourself in, which is a lot easier to pull off than the last two. Of course, the whole point of seeds in fruit is so that things will eat them and crap them out elsewhere to spread the plant around, which would be pretty hard to do if the thing carrying your babies keels over and dies. For this reason, the glycosides are only accessible when one crushes the seeds open. Whole seeds are relatively safe. But if you really wanted to off yourself, you could toss 18 apple cores in a blender and drink the whole thing. The most virulent thing you'll find in your entire produce section, however, is none other than the kidney bean. Yes, this innocent-looking legume holds some sinister secrets. Kidney beans contain a toxin known as phytohemagglutinin, and as little as 4 raw beans worth is enough to trigger symptoms. The main sign of kidney bean poisoning is known scientifically as two-tip tummy terrorism. Boiling the beans deactivates the toxin, which is why we can eat them normally, but heating the beans below the boiling point, as in a slow cooker, actually increases the toxin's potency, to the point where a single heated bean is enough to get you blasting out of both ends. I couldn't actually find any reports on deaths caused by the toxin, probably because everyone who ingests it ends up propelling it away from them at high velocities a few hours later. But it'll certainly make you want to die at least. There are a bunch of other minor sources of poison present in your produce section, of course. I just decided to highlight a few. Subscribers. That's insane. That's crazy. I made this channel like 2 months ago, and I've already got like a town's worth of people following me. So that's fucking awesome. Thank you guys so much. Second of all, summer is coming to a close, as you all know. So unfortunately, I'm probably going to have a lot less time on my hands going forward. Recently I've been uploading like every 3 to 4 days. It's probably going to drop down to like a week, about an upload a week, if I can even manage that. So we'll see. Just don't be surprised. Third, a bunch of people were asking me about making a Patreon account. I'm not going to do that because, see, the whole thing with Patreon is like it gets people to do a monthly regular payment to the channel, and I can't handle that. That's a lot of pressure, because like what if I just start sucking out of nowhere? What if my shit goes to shit, and then I have all these fucking shareholders to be accountable to? So I'm not ready for that kind of commitment, you guys. Of course, if you guys really think I'm worth throwing money at, I guess I'm not going to say no, so I'm going to throw the Google Wallet tip jar function on the splash page of my channel. So if you feel like supporting the channel, you know, perhaps helping me get a less shitty mic, then go right ahead. If not, then that's awesome too. Like, just the fact that you guys are watching my channel is more
Hey kids, now some philosophers have called boats the airplanes of the sea, but while every glamorous Glennis has its slow-mo shun, so too does JJ the jet plane have his awful counterpart. Her legacy in many ways resembles my middle school career, a 3-year-long travesty plagued by blunder after blunder due to both gross incompetence and sheer misfortune, with the only silver lining being that it's remembered by relatively few. Meet the USS William D. Porter, nicknamed the Willie D, which was a perfectly acceptable alias in the days before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She was a Fletcher-class destroyer, which, if you know Fletcher as well as I do, you know he's pretty high-class at destroying. Like when he snapped off my DS screen during summer camp because he was trying to get a better look. Didn't even apologize. He was just like, well, you're not supposed to bring video games to camp anyway. Even though everyone did. Fuck you, Fletcher. You were a counselor. You're supposed to be more mature than us. You're the reason I grew up with a lingering resentment towards authority. And my only reprisal is that I got to draw you as a disgusting fat lard for millions of people. Actually, I think his name might have been Eric. Anyway, in July of 1943, the ship was commissioned by the Navy and led by Lieutenant Commander Wilfred A. Walter. As her first real job, the Willie D was assigned to a top-secret escort mission across the Atlantic. Walter was like, alright man, time to prove ourselves. I want to see you all on your A-game. And as its first act under military command, the ship didn't raise anchor properly and tore a massive chunk out of the ship next to it while pulling out. Okay, rough start, but definitely not a sign of things to come. The next day, she met up with 3 other ships, including 2 destroyers and a battleship known as the USS Iowa, and the fleet set off towards Africa. Given the clandestine nature of the operation, they were ordered to maintain total radio silence so as not to alert any subs that might be lurking below. Suddenly, boom, bang, borf, Hare Krishna, huge explosion off the starboard quarter. They're like, holy shit, evasive maneuvers. But after however many minutes, the transmission comes in saying, hi, this is Wilfred D. of the Willie Walter. So a depth charge may have accidentally fallen off the ship, and we may have also forgotten to turn off the safety mechanisms on said charge, causing it to detonate immediately. So if you heard a little noise a bit ago, no cause for alarm. Also, sorry for breaking radio silence. Love you, bye. Shortly thereafter, a strange phenomenon was spotted near the ship. Officer, what in the rhyme of the ancient fuck is that? Appears to be a large wave, sir. Jesus Christ, they have that now? Basically everything that wasn't tied down ended up being swept off, and one of the boilers in the engine room got foobarred. But fortunately, no crew members were taken away, except for the one that was. Later, the 4 ships congregated in the waters east of Bermuda when the Iowa decided to test its anti-air abilities and launched a bunch of weather balloons for target practice. A few of these drifted towards the Willie D, and they took some potshots just for fun, probably wrecking some happy albatross households in the process. But Walter was like, men, it's time to redeem ourselves. Spit those crayons out. Don't you know the purple ones are bad for you? Time for some impromptu torpedo drills on the Iowa. Yay! That was Narnar and the Pow Pow. They're gonna douse their trousers when they see how good we tore those pedos. Say, you guys remember to take the primer out of all of them before launching, right? Yes, sir. Yep. What? Fortunately, the Iowa didn't really have much valuable cargo that could be damaged in the event that the torpedo struck. Oh, except for 32nd President of the United States Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was being escorted to Cairo as the whole point of the mission. The next 5 minutes aboard the Willie D were just total fucking chaos. Humid sacks of rice, hogs and bats sniffing each other, massive stereos. Commander, we really should radio them. No! I am not breaking any more rules! Do the flashy light thing! Hey, incoming signal from old Iron Brains, a yuck. They're saying they're, going to reverse at full speed? What? Shit off a bowsprit, this ain't working! Fine, call him! FaceTime, oovo, I don't give a hoot! The transmission arrived in the nick of time, and the torpedo detonated a safe distance away in the Iowa's wake. Of course, that didn't stop the entire crew of the Willie D from being arrested for, shooting a torpedo at the president. Lawton Dawson, the Elmer's eater from earlier, was initially sentenced to 14 years hard labor, till FDR came out and was like, no, it's okay. Boys will be boys. But we are sending you and the rest of Carnival Cruise Line to Alaska where there's fewer things to ruin by being yourself. Get it, Carnival Cruise Line? Cause you're the worst. And also clowns. So they kicked it for a while in the Aleutians, otherwise known as the Tale of the Pregnant Rat that makes up Alaska. This went on mostly without incident, except for when they were anchored outside an officer's home during a New Year's Eve party, and a sailor got drunk and decided to fire off one of the 5-inch guns for a laugh, ended up sending a bunch of his geranium straight to hell where they belong. Other than that, smooth sailing. Then they hung out at the Philippines for a bit before Central Command was like, alright, looks like you smooth skins Americans are ready for actual missions again. Except you're going to clown college. And the Willie D was sent to the Battle of Okinawa under the leadership of some guy named Charles. Here they actually did some worthwhile stuff until June 10th, 1945, when a kamikaze began to dive towards them. They weren't able to shoot it down, probably because it wasn't American, but it crashed in the water some ways away. They were like, phew, crisis averted, turned their attention elsewhere, unintentionally driving right over where the bomber landed. The plane was like, the hell? Oh, shit, that's right. Bonsai. About 3 hours of desperate repairs went by before the order to abandon ship was given, and miraculously, every crew member made it out alive by the time the ship sank, just 12 minutes later. So it just goes to show, everything has its silver lining. Everyone on the dipship gets to live, every filthy Chuck E. Cheese ball pit has a delicious prize at the bottom, and the vast nexus of pointless diversions we call the internet actually has a couple productive things to do on it too. Sponsor time! Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. If you're like me, you've been mildly interested in, actual animation for years, but felt too intimidated by the community to really get your hands dirty, Skillshare has plenty of tools to smooth that learning curve down into a gentle exploratory slope. How about this one? Simple character animation. Create a walk cycle with Duik. Look at me! See you later, goof shits, I'm off to autonomize Kurdistan. Join the more than 7 million people already learning today with a special offer just for my viewers. While Skillshare is already less than $10 a month, the first 500 people who visit the link in the description can get a full year subscription for 40% off. So please, quit ruminating and start substantiating today. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and I'm a fellow with rubella.
John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald, Hitler, all people who gained massive notoriety by killing one of history's famous leaders. But there are two Americans who committed an equally heinous crime as these three, yet their stories are seldom remembered, mostly because nobody really cares about the presidents they killed. Originally I was going to talk about both of them, but the video ended up being way too long, so today we'll just stick to, this one I guess. Charles J. Guiteau was a pretty silly guy, and to understand how a guy could be so silly, you gotta start with his youth. Guiteau was born in Freeport, Illinois in 1841. His mom had postpartum psychosis and died when he was 7, alongside 3 of his 5 siblings. His dad, meanwhile, was mega religious and made a big point out of instilling those values in his son, often physically. This influence molded Charles into a boy who sought nothing short of total approval from others and who would react very harshly to any criticism levied upon him. As a teen, he moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan for high school. He tried to get into the University of Michigan, but he goofed on the entrance exam, so he did what anyone in his situation would do and said, well, so much for real life, I'm gonna join a commune. Specifically, he became part of the Oneida community in New York. In some aspects, this place was a pretty run-of-the-mill religious fellowship, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, yada yada. But there were a couple of things that made it special. First off, they followed a doctrine known as Christian perfectionism, whereby everyone would strive to live their lives completely free of sin and reach a divine level of perfection while still on earth. Now this isn't really unique to Oneida, but whereas most people would achieve this through staunch discipline and careful self-reflection, these guys would just get together and take turns roasting the shit out of each and every member over any minute flaw they could possibly have. Real great for the psyche. They also practiced what was basically an early form of eugenics, where aspiring parents would have to submit an application and be judged by the committee on their moral and spiritual fortitude. If they were allowed to mate, children would be separated from the mom about a year after birth and raised communally in the children's wing. After all, wouldn't want any of those hopelessly flawed toddlers to think they're deserving of any affection whatsoever. Oneida also believed in what they called free love, which meant that anyone could bang anyone at any time, as long as they kept it hetero, and exclusive relationships of any kind were actually frowned upon, which seems like kind of a weird habit for people trying to 100% FC this whole Christianity thing, but whatever. But wait, you're saying, how can you have selective breeding at the same time as extremely unselective breeding? Aha! See, that's where male continence comes in. Under this rule, a pair could go at it for as long as they wanted, with the caveat that the dude's not allowed to nut, pull out or otherwise. That way, it's not a sin. After all, as the Bible says, if the dick don't spit, you must acquit. Paradoxically, no such rule existed for the women. In fact, not only did the commune believe in female orgasms, they actually prioritized them, which is like unheard of in the 19th century. They'd even have the middle-aged women of the society train the teen boys in the art of holding in the old pelvic sneeze. That way, there wouldn't be any chance of conception in case the guy goofs up his first few tries. So anyway, young Gito joins this whole thing, and endured countless blows to his massive yet fragile ego, thinking he's at least gonna get a piece of this communal action. Except, the criticism towards him wasn't just a formality like it was for others. Everyone there genuinely fucking hated him, on account of the fact that he was a raving neurotic narcissist. He never caught a single piece of this allegedly free love, and after a while, they all started calling him Charles Get Out in the hopes that he'd leave. This is real. And after 5 long years of this abuse, Gito finally got the hint and moved to New Jersey. He tried starting a newspaper themed around the Oneida religion called the Daily Theocrat, except nobody cared, so that failed. He went back to Oneida and tried to sue the place in order to get back pay for all his voluntary unpaid labor while living there, but apparently I'm mad butthurt isn't a valid reason for prosecution, so that went nowhere. Finally he said, well, when your devotion to God has failed you, there's only one path in life left. Time to become a lawyer. He managed to pass an examination to gain admission to the Illinois bar, and subsequently joined a law firm in Chicago at the age of 27, where he met his soon-to-be wife, one Annie Bunn. Of course, Gito never really got to be a lawyer. He only argued in one actual court case. Most of his time was spent doing bill collection for random clients. This job gave him insight into how debtors think and operate, which allowed him to turn into quite the con man, dodging bills whenever and wherever he saw the opportunity. Even on the job, he'd frequently charge exorbitant contingency fees after the fact, upwards of 75%. And sometimes he'd just keep it all and completely ghost his clients. After all, what are they gonna do? Send another bill collector? Well, it turns out they did, so Gito and his wife fled to New York. Here he ditched law and started getting into politics. Specifically, he wrote and delivered a speech in favor of Horace Greeley, the 1872 Democratic presidential candidate. And he somehow got it in his head that if Greeley won, his campaign would be so greatly indebted to him that they'd fulfill his desires to be the Minister of Chile, as though a total rando like him could just, name a job and it would be his. In reality, the speech was an incoherent mess heard by next to no one, and Greeley lost by a landslide. As the years passed, Annie got real sick of living life on the run with a broke-ass bitch, and Charles was none too keen on her weighing him down either. But back in the day, you couldn't just divorce someone willy-nilly, you needed a valid reason for it. So Charles concocted the brilliant scheme of banging a prostitute and then having her testify in court. The plan worked, with the pair successfully divorcing in 1874, and the only downside was syphilis. Whoops. Gito started dabbling in theology again around this time. He published a book called The Truth, which was almost entirely plagiarized directly from John Noyes, the founder of the Oneida community. But despite being a man of God, Gito was still very much a two-time varmint, and moved frequently in the dead of night to keep collectors off his tail. His brother caught wind of this and wrote him a letter basically saying, hey, maybe you should pay your bills now and then so you can be, a functioning member of society. To which Charles replied, and I quote, find $7 enclosed. Stick it up your bunghole and wipe your nose on it, and that will remind you of the estimation in which you are held by Charles J. Guiteau. God damn. And to his own brother, the madman. Soon after, he got arrested, bailed out by his sister, lived with her for a few months, attacked her with an axe, went to DC, rambled about religion to anyone who would listen, moved to Boston, got in a boat accident where everyone in his boat was fine, but everyone in the other one fucking died, took this as a sign from God, moved back to New York, and got back into politics in 1880, this time as a Republican. During this campaign, there were two main factions of Republicans, known as the Stalwarts and the Half-Breeds, which sounds like some Tolkien shit, wish we had names like that today. Now, Guiteau considered himself a stalwart, and in a similar vein to his 1872 venture, he wrote a speech to promote stalwart candidate Ulysses S. Grant, who was shooting for his third term. But before he got a chance to deliver the speech, one James A. Garfield took the candidacy completely out of nowhere, beating out both factions single-handedly. He was like, rats, how am I gonna get power handed to me now? So he literally just scribbled out all the references to Grant and replaced them with Garfield and was like, yep, that'll do it. He read this speech all of twice, along with handing out copies to the Republican National Committee. In reality, this really didn't accomplish much, but when Garfield managed to win the election, Guiteau was like, yes! That was entirely me! Garfield is in my supreme debt. As God is my witness, he shall make me a consulate in Vienna or Paris or someplace cool like that. He went to DC to await his inevitable appointment, but obviously nothing happened. So he started writing letters. A lot of letters. When that didn't work, he started actually stalking both Garfield and the Secretary of State, James Blaine, intercepting them in hotel lobbies, just being like, oh hey, yeah, it's me, the sole person responsible for your success. Say, how about a consulship? Alright, you'll get back to me, I get it. Whoa, haha.
What a coincidence. Me again. How's that consulship coming? At first they simply ignored him, but eventually Blaine snapped, screaming, "Never speak to me again on the Paris consulship as long as you live."
Damn you, Garfield!
I sense a disturbance in the force. Maybe daylight savings just made Monday an hour longer.
Wow, Garfield, that was quite the wisecrack. It's amazing how you manage to keep things fresh year after year.
Burn in hell, beige dog. At this point, Guiteau completely renounced any faith in the current administration, and after a lifetime of clout chasing met only with disappointment, he decided his only option was straight up going postal. He convinced himself that it was now God's will to remove Garfield from this mortal plane in order to put his stalwart vice president Chester Alan Arthur into power. When he went to buy a revolver, he was given the choice between a wood grip and an ivory grip. He went with the ivory one for no other reason than he thought it would look cooler in a museum, and on July 2nd, 1881, he ambushed Garfield at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station, shooting him twice in the back and mortally wounding him, all because he wouldn't give him a job. Garfield managed to hang on for 11 weeks before finally dying, which sounds like hell. Today's modern physicians actually believe that Garfield could have easily survived the incident if it weren't for doctors digging through him with unsanitized tools. Hey modern medicine, thanks for not being worse than literally no medicine. It means a lot. But that didn't stop Guiteau from being formally charged with murder. And that's exactly what he wanted. Matter of fact, Guiteau was over the moon, taking his new nationwide infamy as the fame he always deserved. His trial was just bananas, with Guiteau hurling obscenities at just about everyone there, including his own defense team, and formatting his testimony as an epic poem which he recited in full. He even dictated an autobiography to the New York Herald, which, get this, he ended with a personal ad for a nice Christian lady under 30 years of age. What a baller. When the guilty verdict was read, he called everybody there low consummate jackasses, and on June 30th, 1882, Guiteau smiled and waved to his adoring fans as he was walked to the gallows, where he recited a repetitive, deranged poem he wrote that morning, which was performed in a high-pitched falsetto voice, since it was written in the point of view of a child. He asked for a full orchestra to play during the reading, which I don't have to tell you that went nowhere, and promptly thereafter, he was hung. When the gallows dropped, people were probably like, ugh, Jesus, it's finally over. I just came here for a nice little execution. They subject me to all that? I want my money back, frankly. So it just goes to show, you can't always get what you want. Unless that thing is getting everyone to hate you, that's extraordinarily easy. But for everything else, you're gonna need a combination of hard work and know-how. While the former must ultimately come from within, there's plenty of resources out there for the latter. The best of which is a seldom talked about little startup called Skillshare. Sponsor time. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. A wise philosopher once said that the most fulfilling pursuit in life is to get to know oneself. Nah, I just made that up. Sounds legit though, right? Now, mindfulness and meditation are all well and good, but how about drawing as self-discovery? Sounds hokey, but I can tell you that I've certainly learned a lot about myself over the years doing this thing, so I'm sure you will too. Join the more than 7 million people already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers. Everyone who visits the link in the description can get 2 months of unlimited access to the 25,000 plus classes on Skillshare for absolutely free. So please, release that tension and get that comprehension today. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam and Ella.
Kids, today I'm going to talk about a few slang words that I never understood. First is chicken legs. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm leaner than lean. So I've received this insult a couple times, hey, chicken legs. But chicken legs really aren't that skinny. Here's a diagram of my leg, right? And here's the average chicken leg. Look at that. I wish I had that kind of calf definition. That's sexy as fuck. There are bodybuilders with less meat on their bones than that. And considering the fact that most people have interacted with the drumstick at some point in their lives, I'm frankly dumbfounded that anyone ever thought to use this to refer to skinny people. Then there's socking someone. Hey man, I'm trying to think of a new slang word for punching someone in the face really hard. Like just destroying someone with your fists. Got any ideas? How about one of the softest, gentlest, and most unassuming objects found in one's entire house? That's like kicking someone in the dick and being like, whoa bro, you just got feathered. Fuck you, don't try to downplay my suffering. If anything, I got shin bashed in the dick bag. That's the proper level of vulgarity relative to the situation. Anyway, it would make a little more sense if you said gloved, because at least those are socks for your hands. But no, it's nonsense. Next is blow, in reference to cocaine. It's a form of air movement, so I guess this one is like like half correct, but it could still lead to a lot of confusion. Yo, y'all wanna do some blow? Oh, gee whiz, well, okie dokie. Oh, I'm feeling it. It's kicking in. Oh, doggy, that's some nifty blow you got there, eh? Get out of my house. Next is nuts. When somebody is nuts, it means they're wild, they're crazy, they live life on the edge, right? What the fuck is so exciting about this? Finally, box. So box is a common slang word for one's lady bits, right? Now I've only been around 2 vaginas in my life. I came out of one of them when I was born, and I spent most of my time around the other one with my eyes closed, so my knowledge on that subject might be a little shaky. However, I have been around hundreds of thousands of boxes in my life. I know those inside and out, so that should make up for it. And let me tell you, these two things could not be less similar in shape. You see, boxes have corners. If your pussy has corners, you should probably start taking the tampons out of the container before you put them in. Likewise, if you compare the properties of either object, you'll notice that they're basically opposites in every way, so as a slang word, it's totally unfitting. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
More cases of stiff lifting from the days of yore. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go check it out. Or don't. I'm a YouTuber, not a cop, unfortunately. This first tale doesn't feature an entire dead body, but I still found it interesting enough to talk about. So one day in 2012, a priest was riding a train out of Italy when his bag got stolen by a trio of thieves. Inside the bag was whatever normal personal possessions the guy happened to own, as well as a small vial containing the blood of none other than Pope John Paul II. So this begs the question, why did the priest have Pope blood in his bag? Well, an important way that the Catholic Church honors saints and other venerated individuals is the keeping of relics. These relics are ranked in terms of how close they were to the person at hand. You got something that's tangentially related to a saint in any way, that's a 3rd class relic. If it's a personal possession of a saint, it's 2nd class. And as for 1st class relics, those typically consist of literal body parts and or fluids of a holy figure. Now for you youngsters out there, in 1981 the Pope got shot 4 times by some fascist having a bad day. People are like, holy shit, it's a popicide! Is that even a word? No, I'm okay. Oh. Say, who left all this 1st class relic lying around? So to this day, there remain 3 objects containing the fine-aged poppy juice spilled that fateful afternoon. The vial was found a few hours later by police among the reeds and grass near the station, which basically means the thieves took one look at it and were like, blood? I already make this myself. Lame, and tossed it out without a second thought. Here's the thing though, that's not the only instance of old JP2 getting blood napped. In 2014, a similar relic was yoinked from the church of San Pietro della Ienca in Italy alongside a crucifix. The fact that these were the only items taken led to 2 prevailing theories. Some people thought that, since John Paul II wasn't technically a saint yet, the relic's value would go way up once the man was actually canonized, so the thieves decided to take it now and resell it later. The other theory was way more popular with the media. After all, what use does Pope blood have other than satanic rituals? This story naturally got a lot of press, and the whole world just kind of assumed that Lucifer himself was set to return any day now. Eventually, the thieves confessed, so authorities came to the rehab facility they were staying at. They returned the cross, but when questioned about the relic, they were like, wait, what? Pope blood? Satan? Do you guys need to check in here too? Eventually, it was found in a rubbish bin on the facility grounds, which means once again, it was just casually tossed out as nonsense. You ever throw out Pope blood? Because apparently, multiple people have done that on separate occasions just in the past 7 years. It doesn't end there, of course. In 2016, this happened a 3rd time when a piece of cloth with John Paul fluid on it was taken from Cologne Cathedral. I can't for the life of me find a follow-up to this story, which leads me to believe that they're just like, fuck it, Pope blood's more trouble than it's worth at this point. But if you guys can find some conclusion to where it ended up, let me know below. Now, our next story begins with a man named Karl Tanzler, a German-born radiology technologist in early 20th century Florida. He looked kind of like Sigmund Freud, except even more evil looking. On the inside, he was a pretty normal dude, other than the fact that he claimed to have visions throughout his life of some mysterious dark-haired girl. Anyway, in 1930, while working at the Marine Hospital in Key West, he met a young woman by the name of Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, called Elena for short, and he said, "Oh my god, that's the girl from the visions I've been having." Yeah, wait, what? "We were meant to meet today. We must be soulmates." What? Don't you have like a wife and 2 kids? Destiny. Hoyos was soon diagnosed with tuberculosis, which was considered fatal at the time, so naturally Carl decided to handle her treatment, going as far as convincing her family to let him visit their home every day. Except he was a radiologist, so even if there were reliable means to treat tuberculosis at the time, he definitely didn't have the credentials to do so, but whatever. This is the past we're talking about after all. That place was a shit show from start to finish. I'm not about to get on somebody's case for a little clerical error. In addition to whatever salves and tinctures and such doctors gave to people back then, Tansler showered her with gifts of clothes and jewelry. I know he meant well, but if I was bedridden with a terminal illness, I'd just be insulted. Like, wow, thanks, can't wait to show off this little number out on the town. Anyway, eventually, Tansler found that the time had come to reveal his true feelings. Elena, there's something I must confess. I'm deeply in love with you. I'm so glad you feel the same. Hoyos inevitably succumbed to the disease, leaving Tansler heartbroken. He just wasn't ready to part ways with his pestilence-riddled sweetheart, so he asked the family's permission to commission an above-ground mausoleum for their daughter. And since this was the early 20th century, they said, what a sweet, selfless man. I'm sure he'd never do this just so he could commit crimes against nature. Then he was like, oh yeah, by the way, could I have some of her hair too? Sure, kind stranger. Here's a bag of her hair we just had lying around for some fucking reason. Again, no red flags here. He went to visit her dwelling nearly every night for 2 years. Then finally one day he said, you know what, kid? You're alright. Say, how's about we ditch this musty old mausoleum and go back to my place? I'll take that as a yes. So he took her home in a little red toy wagon, which is ridiculous. It makes me picture him skipping around, whistling a merry tune. Hey neighbor! Now here's a riddle for all you intellectuals out there. What do a dead body and a used PT Cruiser have in common? Sure, they both taste terrible, and you never want to be seen in public with one. Most importantly though, they're a depreciating asset. But hey, that didn't stop old gnarly Carly from sprucing her up any way he could, wiring her bones back together with coat hangers, replacing her skin with wax and silk, making a wig out of that bag of hair from earlier, and soaking the body in massive amounts of perfume and disinfectants, for obvious reasons. He claimed to have been instructed to do all this by Elena's spirit, which he would apparently talk to frequently. He also did, you know, that thing eccentric loners do with dead ladies in their house, but we won't talk about that. This went on for 7 years, 7 hot and humid Florida years, until 1940 when Elena's sister saw him dancing with some lady through the curtains. She's like, aw, how cute. I'm glad that old bag of lentils has finally found love. Walks in, comes to find out, it's her fucking dead sister. So the cops come, but there isn't any conclusive evidence of any flirting and philandering with the body, so the only crime Carl could have been charged with was grave robbing. Except the statute of limitations was already up by the time he was found out, so they just took the body, tipped their hats, and went on their merry way. Tansler still missed Elena dearly, but since he couldn't have her cadaver, he crafted a crude homemade effigy of the lady, which he lived with for the rest of his life. Here's the part that really gets me though. He apparently went back to live with his estranged wife once the jig was up. Just like, hey babe, I know we haven't talked since the whole corpse thing, but I've been having trouble making rent. Do you think I could come crash for a while? Sure, come right in. I'll take your coats. Would you and the demented life-size replica of your long-dead lover that you left me for like a cup of tea? I'd like one. None for her though. It goes right through her. Of course, I'm making all this out to be a horrifying thing for the goofs and gaffs of it, but at the time, a lot of people read the news stories about Tansler, and many actually sympathized with the man. They saw him as the distraught, hapless romantic that he saw himself as. You know why they had that compassion? Because they listened. Say, what would the world look like if we all listened more? Sponsor time! Listening to audiobooks inspires us, motivates us, even brings us closer, and there's no better place to listen than Audible. But what should you listen to, you ask? After all, there's so many options that it's almost overwhelming. Well, normally I tell you to go listen to my book, but unfortunately I've never written a book, so instead, how about the Necronomicon? That's right, the Necronomicon is on Audible. Now you too can learn exactly how to put that Pope blood in the backseat to use on your way to work. Tie in. In all seriousness, a novel really worth checking out is Edwin Abbott's Flatland, a book about life in an entirely two-dimensional universe, and it is a trip, trust me. You can get your first audiobook free along with 2 selected Audible original titles and exclusive fitness programs when you start your 30-day trial. Just visit audible.com/salmonella or text salmonella to 500 to get started. Again, go to audible.com/SAMONELLA or text SAMONELLA to try Audible for free.
can all agree that there are few pastimes more grotesque than competitive eating. The concept of a bunch of guys pushing their anatomy to its limits just for sport leaves a bad taste in my mouth in more ways than one. But imagine if these men didn't adopt this habit just for fun. Imagine if some gross biological error forced them to eat like this for their entire life. Introducing Tarare. Tarare was born in France around 1772 to a poor farming family. It's said that his appetite was so voracious that, by his teens, Tarare could eat an entire quarter of a cow carcass in a single day. You'd think he'd be like mega obese, but no, he only weighed 100 pounds by age 17. However, there were still a few things that stood out about Tarare appearance-wise. For one, he had a huge, stretched-out mouth with horribly stained teeth. He could reportedly fit 12 eggs in his cheeks at once, much like a chipmunk keeping its chipmunk eggs warm. Additionally, when Tarare was full, he'd get a crazy octomom gut going, and any other time, he'd have a huge flap of stretched out skin hanging around his waist. He also stank to high hell, even by 18th century French peasant standards. He was described as reeking, quote, to such a degree that he could not be endured within the distance of 20 paces. So between all this and his horrendous outhouse flooding dumps, his family had had enough. Alright, you're eating us out of house and home here. You gotta go, man. You heard me. Kick bricks, Froggy. Wow, he just called a French person a frog. That's so racist. No, it's not. They're all French. The guy just looks like a frog is all. Oh. Well, too late. I'm already offended. That's fair. Dislike. After leaving home, Tarare was forced to beg and steal just to satisfy his gargantuan appetite. Inevitably, people began to take notice of him, and eventually he landed a job as a street performer in Paris. People would hand Tarare entire baskets of apples, eggs, and even wine corks, and watch in delight as he horked them down without the slightest hesitation. Normally, this went off without a hitch, except for one time when he suffered a severe intestinal blockage. Fortunately, the crowd was kind enough to carry him to the hospital, where he was treated with the strongest laxatives the 18th century had to offer. I would draw what happened next, but it would probably get my channel deleted, so let's just picture it for a few moments. Moving on. Cut to the year 1792. This marks the beginning of the War of the First Coalition. Ever heard of it? Me neither. Who was in it? Fucking everyone. Anyway, Tarare decided to enlist in the war. After all, maybe that profound emptiness he was feeling was just a lack of purpose in life. Turns out, no, he really was just psychotically hungry. Even after being granted quadruple rations, Tarare would still be digging through the trash pile whenever he got the chance. After suffering extreme exhaustion, he was sent off to the military hospital in Souterrain. The staff there was so dumbfounded by the man's abilities that they decided to keep him there to run a few experiments. The first of which involved putting Tarare in a room with a meal prepared for 15 people. Naturally, he ate the entire thing and immediately fell asleep. Next, they presented him with a raw eel. In response, Tarare crushed the eel's skull between his teeth before slurping down the entire creature in one go. Now, this is hair-clenchingly horrifying for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he put a whole frickin' eel in his stomach, but secondly, there had to be some point during digestion where the meat was gone but the bones still remained. Now, for those of you who don't know, an eel skeleton looks like this. That means Tarare had all of those needle-sized ribs stabbing into the walls of his stomach at once, and he was fine. He also ripped a live cat apart with his bare hands, drank its blood, and ate everything but its bones, and then later gagged up the fur and skin like an owl, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. After reviewing our data, I've come to the scientific conclusion that, yeah, we got a goddamn demon on our hands. But as we all know, with great devour comes great responsibility. Since Tarare was still technically enlisted, the military decided to utilize his abilities for the greater good. Hey Tarare, it's me, the General. Listen, could you eat this box with a note in it for me? If you do it, we'll give you a wheelbarrow full of bull organs. Lo and behold, 2 days later, he passed the container in mint condition and was given his reward as promised. With this proof of concept, they made him an official spy and sent him into Prussia with a document in his belly, to be delivered to an imprisoned French colonel. Unfortunately, there are a couple things Tarare couldn't do that are generally important when sneaking into another country. A, he couldn't speak German, and B, it's pretty hard to maintain a low profile when you're running around like a madman wolfing down garbage and mutilating small animals. So he ended up being captured by the enemy. Initially, he kept his mouth shut, for once, but after a whipping and a day in jail, Tarare gave in. After confessing that he did, in fact, have vital intelligence snaking its way through his GI tract, the Prussians chained him to a latrine until the box emerged 30 hours later. The note wasn't actually anything important, so they just mock executed him, gave him a severe beating, and sent him on his way. After all that, Tarare returned to life at the hospital, desperate for a cure for his condition, but nothing they ever tried worked. Meanwhile, the man's endless hunger
hunger continued to get him into all sorts of trouble. He'd often sneak out of the hospital to eat the scraps behind the local butcher and fight stray dogs in the alley for their precious garbage. He'd also seek out patients undergoing bloodletting in order to take all their life juice for himself. On several occasions, he was even caught attempting to eat bodies in the mortuary. By this point in my research, I was so desensitized to this guy that I didn't even bat an eye when I first read that. I was just like, alright. Guess he must have been hungry. Anyway, the hospital staff begrudgingly tolerated Terare's buffoonery, until one day when he went too far. Well, Terare, you've only had 3 mess hall raids, 4 miscellaneous trash-related mishaps, and 1 cadaver defiling, so I'd say, so far, this week's been pretty good. Doctor, we should probably inform you that a 14-month-old child has gone missing from their room. Terare, look at me. Did you eat a fucking baby? Terare was promptly kicked out of the hospital and spent 4 years out and about doing, whatever horrific shit you can imagine. When he came back, he was suffering from advanced tuberculosis and died shortly after arrival. During his autopsy, the surgeons found that, when they looked into his mouth, they could see all the way down his throat and into his stomach cavity. As you can imagine, his whole abdominal region was profoundly deformed. Basically, if this is a normal human, this is what they found inside Terare. Just like the man's mind, we can see that around 90% is devoted towards food and 10% towards everything else. So, moral of the story here is that, no, you know what, not even I can find anything resembling a moral here. Not all stories have a point to them. Sometimes they're just sad and disgusting from beginning to end. And now a word from our sponsor. As you can probably tell, I'm a very visual person when it comes to learning. I firmly believe that engaging visuals are an essential teaching tool that allows for much deeper comprehension than plain old walls of text. That's why I'm pleased to introduce our sponsor, Brilliant.org. We all know that math and science are really important to master, and Brilliant's elegant UI and step-by-step design makes learning seemingly complex topics very intuitive, especially for visual learners. Their straightforward graphics, delightful animations, and interactive puzzles make it easy and fun to hone your own critical thinking skills. Personally, I've always been super intrigued by neural networks and all the things you can do with them, but I've always been too intimidated to research them in depth. After learning about Brilliant, I actually started taking their course in the subject, and I gotta say, it's been such a pleasurable experience that I plan to continue with it in my own spare time. To support me and learn more about Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/salmonella and sign up for free. Also, the first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription.
As we all know, the evolution of species is an incredible process, driven by little more than the random chance that certain mutations may happen to provide a practical advantage in a creature's environment. And as a result, there's a lot of things out there that look super dumb once you strip back a few layers. Here's the top 10 worst animal skeletons of all time. So first and foremost, I'd like to settle a little debate I've been seeing floating around the past few weeks. Yes, penguins do, in fact, have knees, but in order to hide full-grown legs into one plump cylinder, you gotta have a little skeletal trickery on your side. You guys ever do wall sits in gym class or elsewhere? One of the most torturous exercises out there. I now feel even worse for penguins, because not only did they have to deal with living in a frigid black and white hellscape, the most hostile environment known to man second only to the vacuum of space, all the while constantly pursued by ravenous bloodthirsty sea dogs, but they're also secretly doing wall sits their entire life. Quick side note, in Mandarin, the word for penguin consists of the characters for business goose, which is fucking hilarious. Like one day a goose put on a suit and said, "Today it is time to make a name for myself, honk." This next guy is known as Parsons chameleon, found in the more remote regions of Madagascar. Notice the fleshy protuberances around its nose area. Turns out, not fleshy, not even remotely fleshy, not even one flesh. Instead, it just has a skull forever frozen in time in the middle of exploding, like it sneezed right in the middle of God shaping it out of clay, and he was just like, whatever, it's a feature now. So for that, this rough-headed reptilian gets number 9. Normally I would have ranked it higher, but that's a dope tale, so he gets some pity points. Next is the pufferfish. So for most of my life, I've pictured pufferfish as just not having any bones. I know it doesn't really make sense, but neither does them turning into a balloon like a goddamn cartoon. Turns out, in their normal state, they actually look like this, and when they inflate, those concentric rings of spine slide outwards past one another to cover the full area, like the aperture of a camera lens expanding to cover the full frame of the fish. The sheer ingenuity of this design has shattered my childhood dream of real-life balloon animals, which has earned the pufferfish the number 8 spot on this list. Now, Now, if you've gotten around to certain zoological circles, you've been shown this skull and been told, ah yes, that comes from the dwarf elephant. Oh, you've never seen one? That's because they're extinct. And that thing in the middle? Ah yes, nothing more than the nose hole to which the trunk connects. However, if you're a rational, free-thinking adult like me, you can look past the lies spoon-fed to you by Nat Geo and other liberal media outlets and see this for what it is. A cyclops. Next is the orca, otherwise known as the killer whale, the panda torpedo, or the SeaWorld slave. Its skeleton is fairly normal at first glance, but check out this little thing under here. That little bony blip is actually all that remains of the legs and pelvis of the orca from when it evolved from land mammals. Personally, I think that's highly disrespectful to their ancestors. Like, they could have taken the seal route and used those legs for good in the water, but instead these sea cowards said, no thanks, we're gonna undo all that evolution and just be bigger, smarter, warmer fish again. But hey, we'll keep this little piece of nothing just to remember you guys by. Truthfully, I could have chosen almost any cetacean to pick on for this, but the orca's face also reminds me of SCP-682, which is the most OP overrated shit out there, so he gets the number 6 spot. Moving on, now bear with me here. In every other mammal on Earth, the canine teeth point downward from the gum to the mouth. You know, like a tooth. But this guy, known as the Babirusa, said, "Huh," and decided to have them grow up through the entirety of its fucking snoot and out the other end, which is the most nonsensical thing I've ever seen. Like, toenails out the front? How cliche. Let's make them go through the whole foot instead. Look, now I can kick good behind me. That's not all though. These tusks also keep growing for the creature's entire life, which isn't a problem in and of itself, right? Rodents, they keep chewing stuff to wear them down. Alligators, they just let them fall out now and then. But the Babirusa's like, I'll just nut in a lady pig long before this becomes an issue. So if it lives long enough, the teeth can curve right on around and slowly bore into the thing's face, like built-in Chinese bamboo torture. And occasionally, they can end up actually piercing the skull and shish kebabbing the brain. Now some people might say that this doesn't belong on this list, given that teeth aren't technically bones. And to those people, kids, we say, eat shit and die. Next we have the octopus. The octopus skeleton is so bad that it doesn't even exist. Sure, they got this little thing in the middle, but that doesn't count, that's just chitin. And yeah, they can get in a jar or whatever, but at what cost? At the animal picnics, the crowd shouts, "Bleh, shun the spineless freak." And at the animal wheelbarrow races, with nothing to grab hold of, the cephalopod holds a solitary vigil at the starting line. And lo, the octopus wins naught but a participant medal at the Grand Prix, and the number 4 spot on this list. Moving on, here's the skeleton of a fruit bat. Now, not a big deal to us regular folk, but imagine if humans had no context of bats and they dug this thing up. Like, class, archaeologists have recently found these fossilized remains, and using modern technology, we can see exactly what it would have looked like back when it was alive. This abominable creature is known only to scientists as Finger Boy, and is theorized to have fed upon fruit, insects, and the dreams of orphans, which it would siphon out from the ears of the errant little waifs whilst they slumbered. By the way, if you Google image bat skeleton, like, more than half of them have the ears built in, just like, I feel the extraordinarily bat-like wings and figure of our decoration are much too subtle for our consumers. Better slap these on. At number 2, we have the anteater. From its oboe-like skull to its gorilla fist and hands, one can only wonder who let this creature exist. Fun fact, if you take the anteater's skull and blow into its nose, it plays a beautiful song recounting the animal's entire life, and then security escorts you out of the museum. Looking at this, I can only pose the question asked for generations long before my own. That being, why the long face? Before we get to the number 1 spot, here's a few honorable mentions. The wolf eel. The ostrich. This human-cat hybrid I found on a tabloid site. And of course, the mermaid. So at our number 1 spot, we have this creature. That's supposed to be a mirror. I know most of you can't see yourself in it on account of your filthy Dorito-smeared screen, so just take my word for it. So what's wrong with humans, you ask? Well, a lot of things, but for now let's stick to the skeleton. First off, these bones right here, these are known as the metatarsals. All part of the foot, right? No, that's a bunch of primate propaganda. In most other groups of land mammals, what we'd consider our ankles is actually the quote-unquote knee of the animal. Thanks a lot, walking upright. Also, it's estimated that around 80% of people will experience chronic back pain at some point in their life. Thanks a lot, walking upright. Lastly, probably something you've heard about at some point, our skull to pelvis ratio. For most animals, giving birth, not a big deal. Small heads, wide hips, mazel tov. But check out the big brain on Brett. Throws a real monkey wrench in the works there. For a while it led to some problems till those extra brains figured out how to work around it, so I guess you win this round, humans. But that doesn't stop you from also winning the #1 spot on the worst skeletons of all time. But hey, just cause you'll forever be flawed on the inside, doesn't mean you can't improve yourself on the outside. That's why you need to try Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. For all my life, I thought I knew how to make a grilled cheese. Then I saw this class, and I realized I didn't. Now I do again, but those few minutes between seeing the thumbnail and finishing the course were a dark time in my life. But let's say you don't like grilled cheese. Well, you must be either vegan or dead, and either way, you probably smell terrible. What better way to soak up that earthy must in your home than with a hand-selected houseplant known to improve air quality? You can even put googly eyes on it. Aw, it's like I have a friend. Join the more than 7 million people already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers. Everyone who visits the link in the description can get 2 months of unlimited access to the 25,000 plus classes on Skillshare for absolutely free. So please. Hey kids, if I learned anything from my middle school career, it's that what may seem like a good idea initially will often be remembered only as a foolish mistake. Here's a few pieces of technology from yesteryear that have since fallen into total obscurity. So I've always believed that there's no point in having many small things when you can have one big thing. Why have many shrimp when you can have one lobster? Why drink many glasses of milk when you can eat one udder? Why have many cheese-its when you can have one cheese-them? Patent pending. And why have many street lights when you can have one moonlight tower? These guys were real popular back in the 1880s and 90s, often standing at over 150 feet tall and illuminating several blocks from a single point. Not very well, mind you. Matter of fact, they were so dim, we didn't even have the conscience to just call them light towers. Had to go and stick the moon on the front so people didn't get their hopes up. But thanks to our good old friend the inverse square law, you still needed a fuck ton of light to pull this off. So they used incredibly harsh and UV emitting arc lights instead of incandescent bulbs. All the light of the moon and all the vision damage of the sun? Talk about a win-win. Sadly, these beasts have fallen by the wayside over the past century or so, except for in Austin, apparently, but they use friendlier mercury vapor lamps in them, so they only get half points. Now, anyone who's been around a baby long enough knows they always have a cloud of ghoulish stench hovering around them. Jeez Louise, somebody better air out that musty little muskrat before Grandma starts drooping again. You could stick him on the clothesline for a while, but knowing that little moron, I'm sure he'd find a way to hurt himself somehow. Introducing the baby cage. Finally, city dwellers all across the nation have a way of unleashing their postnatal funk on the unsuspecting passerby below. These were in vogue for a while before falling out of style a bit of the way into the 20th century, because apparently society started deeming babies more valuable than air conditioners. I don't really get it personally, but this is also around the time we started putting lead in gasoline, so it's probably for the best we kept them inside all day. Matter of fact, it's my firm belief that without kids growing up breathing lead, there's no way pet rocks would have taken off in the 70s.
Wow, alienating baby boomers. He's so brave and controversial.
Now, in the days between the Great War and the not as great but still pretty alright war, people were trying to find efficient means of detecting an incoming air attack. They climbed their nation's tallest mountains to seek the wisdom of their greatest elders, and the wise men said, big ears. So that's what they did. These giant discs were known as acoustic mirrors and were designed to focus incoming sound over a 5-meter diameter into a single point. They were reasonably effective as listening devices. A few of them in Britain were able to pick up the sound of a plane from all the way across the English Channel. Of course, radar came along soon after, rendering these things completely useless beyond looking brutalist as hell. For real, instant album cover material right here. Ah! One of the Pep Boys is pulling a Spanish Inquisition on this poor wayward harlot. Huh. Just kidding. Despite the fact that this looks so very, very much like a state-of-the-art instrument of torture, it's actually just a beauty micrometer. Think those shoe size measurer things at Foot Locker, only instead of one primitive measurement, it records the entire topology of your face and skull at once. With this data, a trained cosmetologist would be able to pinpoint exactly what features of your head should be enhanced and reduced with makeup in order to achieve a maximum calculated attractiveness after you've paid for their services. Clearly this device must have been effective. After all, beauty is entirely objective. What, eye of the beholder? Huh. Check the name tag, buddy. Apparently, though, women didn't like being strapped into a birdcage and having their every minute flaw meticulously laid out in front of them, so this thing never really took off in the end. Next, we have the Humlauf. This was a device made during World War II designed to let infantry shoot around corners. It's like the Germans sat down and watched that part in Tom and Jerry where the conniving rat bends the gun barrel back at his adversary. They said, Mein Gott! They came in a variety of angles between 30 and 90 degrees, and even came with a little periscope so you could see what you were shooting at. But as we all come to find out when we reach adolescence, cartoons are the arbiters of deceit, because these things would invariably break within the first couple hundred shots or so. And even when they did work, the rounds would fucking explode from the massive acceleration, turning a deadly bullet into an ineffectual spray of shrapnel. These were so ineffective that only the 30-degree model ever saw significant production beyond prototypes, and even that was very limited. Say, you ever look at regular mousetraps and go, not enough property damage? Well, check this out. Patented in 1882, it's the revolver mousetrap, brought to you by the makers of the snail trebuchet and the cockroach claymore. Thanks to the marvels of the modern era, all those tiresome hours of intense varmint slang can be outsourced to one little gadget on the floor of your kid's playroom. Now when you hear a gunshot in the middle of the night, you can rest easy knowing that, one way or the other, there's one less pest for you to deal with in the morning. Boom. 1850. Steam locomotives are all the rage. You're in the transport business, but all you can afford is a couple dumb horses. Sure, they move things from point A to point B almost as well at a fraction of the cost, but your cool rail-riding friends called you a whack-ass and it really hurt your feelers. Well, have we got the invention for you? The Impulsoria uses an ingenious system of treadmills to turn that horse to be beckoned into a force to be reckoned with. Sure, it's expensive as hell to make and limits your services entirely to railroads, but just look at it. Instant Pussymobile. Slap some rims and a spoiler on that, you're laughing. This machine is recorded at having a maximum output of 2 to 4 horsepower, which sounds about right, and it didn't see much use outside a couple exhibitions. Now, if there's one hobby that people in the past enjoyed, it's smoking. Whoo boy did they like smoking. And with every great wholesome activity comes a million novelty items to go along with it. Everyone's seen the long cigarette, but how about the really long cigarette? Want to smoke in the rain? Here you go. Going snorkeling? Hey, you know what's more important than oxygen? Nicotine. But hey, want to know the only thing better than a cigarette? 2 cigarettes. You know what? Fuck it. Have the whole pack. You earned it. Of course, if you're trying to cut back, you can always share it with a friend. Aw, how heartburning. But you know what's even more fun than addiction? High-quality documentaries. That's why you should check out CuriosityStream. From the face behind the Discovery Channel, CuriosityStream lets you stuff your little meatuses full of all the bizarre knowledge the world has to offer. And with over 2,400 titles, there's no way there isn't something that interests you here. Remember Secret Life of Pets? Trash movie. Turgid prose, stilted dialogue, pandering humor, and above all, highly unrealistic. On the other hand, The Secret Life of Dogs is an absolute treasure. Did you know they turn their tongues into weird inside-out ladles when they drink? Just one of the many fun facts found inside. Normally, full access to CuriosityStream only costs $2.99 a month or $20 a year, which is nothing. That's like a McDonald's run every 4 months. But if you still have your doubts, you can get 30 days free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/salmonella and use promo code salmonella.
Kids, it's Food Friday. So today's lesson is on the history of sushi. Sushi first came into existence in Japan around the 8th century. It consisted of gutted, salted fish stored in fermented rice. You know, this half-rotting rice is good and all, but I can still smell things. Yeah, and I'm not having nearly as much diarrhea as I would like to be. What should we do? Raw fish. Raw fish, I was thinking exactly the same thing. God, we are so in sync. Nah, but actually, the rice wasn't meant to be eaten. It was only used as a means of preservation. You see, the fermenty juices of the rice would soak into the fish and prevent it from spoiling. However, as semi-rancid food often does, it would also impart a sour taste on the fish. That's where the name sushi comes from, an antiquated Japanese term for sour tasting. Also, it smelled like death. The odor is described as an extremely pungent cross between blue cheese, fish, and vinegar. Man, I'm mad. Why's that? I smelled something down the road. Thought a new sushi vendor was in town. Turns out, it was just a hobo taking a piss on a tuna sandwich. Later on, during the late Edo period, people started pickling the rice, which drastically shortened the required fermentation time. So now, rather than smelling like blue cheese, fish, and vinegar, it just smelled like fish and vinegar. Go figure. People found this rice to be much more palatable, so it began to be eaten alongside the fish. Sheet seaweed was also invented around 1750, which allowed the contemporary sushi roll to take form around this time. Toss in a couple vegetables, and you've got something much more resemblant to today's sushi. During the late 19th century, many Japanese emigrated to America to escape the imperial takeover of Japan, which was known as the Meiji Restoration. It just so happens that they brought the concept of sushi with them, which enjoyed brief popularity among the upper class during the turn of the 20th century. However, coinciding with the imperial takeover was the fact that Japan started being kind of a dick. Hey, freedom is gay. What did you just say? Yeah, your way of life is for pussies. Oh yeah? Guess we'll just stop eating your dumb fucking fish roll things then. Hey, fuck you, you cheeseburger slut! I'll nuke your bitch ass! Wait, what is nuke? 40 years, you'll see! And thus, sushi lost its place in the West. Cut to the early 1960s. World War II tensions are mostly gone, and refrigeration is everywhere. This allowed sushi to again rise in America, this time for good. By the 1980s, sushi restaurants were everywhere, especially along the West Coast. But as you can imagine, American sushi saw significant alteration in order to appeal more to the Western palate. For example, if you went to Japan and asked for cream cheese in your roll, they'd probably just put you on a raft and gently push you out to sea. But to each their own, and today sushi is more popular than ever. So kids, remember to be careful of who you make fun of. Because the weird smelly kid of today, it's Misk Monday, so I'm going to tell you all a story from my childhood. I was in 5th grade at the time, about 10 or 11. I was in that YMCA aftercare program at my school, you know, where they watch kids for a while before their parents pick them up, right? So the story centers around 2 other kids there. One was a 5th grader, we'll call him Carl, and the other was a 1st grader, we'll call him Tyrone. So to preface, Tyrone was a bit odd. He didn't talk much, he was always just kinda looking around, but generally he was a good kid. So one day I'm sitting there, minding my own business, when I see Carl walk into the bathroom. And then about 10 seconds later, I see Tyrone follow him in there. I didn't really think anything of it until I hear Carl shout from inside the bathroom. I look over and Tyrone comes running out crying. So the counselors ask him what happened. Tyrone points at Carl and says, "He pushed me." They asked Carl if it was true, and Carl gives the full explanation of what actually went down in the bathroom. So it turns out Carl was just at the urinal, minding his own business, when Tyrone walks in, walks right up to him, and starts poking him on the balls while he's peeing. So Carl, who was still, midstream, couldn't really use his hands to stop him, so he reflexively did this sort of hip check to push the kid away. The kid hits the ground, immediately starts crying, and runs out of the bathroom. So the counselors excused Carl and politely asked Tyrone what he was doing touching an older boy's nads. Tyrone replies, I just wanted to make sure he got all the pee out. So ultimately, it just ended with the counselors explaining to him that you shouldn't touch other people's junk. I'm just glad he decided to pull this sort of thing now in a public school to another kid. Imagine if he did this in a public restroom. It would have probably ended with some guy getting arrested. Thankfully, Tyrone never touched another sack again.
Hey kid. Yeah, you. I just got off the phone with the big man upstairs, and he told me that I need to clear a few things up around here. So without further ado, here's 10 pieces of malarkey that you might still be spreading. Number 1. Nobody was ever burned to death at the Salem witch trials. Of the accused, 15 died in prison, 19 were hanged, and 1 was squished to death. That last one is way more interesting than any cremation, by the way. Dude was a badass. His name was Giles Corey. He was 81 years old and so done with the town of Salem's garbage that he wouldn't even dignify the trial with a plea. So the town stuck in between 2 boards and stacked rocks on top of him in an effort to draw out a confession. But every time they tried to get something out of him, all he would say was, "More weight." This went on for 3 solid days until he finally died, never giving any indication as to whether or not he was a witch. One can only wonder. Number 2, the OG Buddha wasn't the obese guy. That's Budai, a Chinese folk character meant to represent Maitreya, aka future Buddha. Now this shirt is double sad. Number 3, Buddha wasn't a god either. He was just a guy named Gautama. Now this shirt is triple sad. Number 4. Ever heard of a vomitorium? Turns out, no. It's not a place where Roman nobles would go to make room for more pheasant spleen and lobster eyelids. It's just a big entranceway to the coliseums that hordes of peasants would spew out of. Number 5. Washington never cut down a cherry tree in his youth. I don't get this one at all. Apparently it's supposed to paint the man in a good light somehow. It's like, Tyler, what the hell happened while we were gone? Where's the tree in the front yard? Oh yeah, that was me. Got bored. Just felt like vandalizing something, you know?
Hey, what about my honest character? Number 6, the pyramids weren't actually built by slaves. These workers were respected members of society. They ate meat and worked in 3-month shifts, and even got to be buried right next to the tomb after their death. Matter of fact, that's more than we can say for the people working on man's greatest achievements today. If I spent years of my life helping to build the space station, you're damn right I'd want the Salmonella Memorial Corpse Receptacle floating along right next to it. That would be amazing. Number 7, the Great Wall of China is not the only man-made object visible from space. I don't know where you dipshits got this one from. First of all, there's no way you could see it with the unaided eye. The wall is like 30 meters thick at most, while the distance to outer space is generally recognized to be 100 kilometers up, known as the Kármán line. To give some perspective, that's like me holding up a standard-sized guitar pick from across the entire length of a football field and asking you what color it is. Also, there are plenty of man-made objects that are way bigger in terms of local surface area than the Great Wall, so even if it was visible, there's no way it would be the only one. Number 8, you might have heard this one before. You know, Hitler was a jerk and all, but hey, he made the Autobahn, so at least he was efficient. Actually, Hitler didn't create the Autobahn. It was already there. He just helped expand it into newer territory. In a similar vein, Mussolini didn't make the trains run on time, with most of Italy's infrastructure repairs happening before his rise to power in 1922, and even then they weren't nearly as punctual as he'd like you to believe. So unfortunately, you're gonna have to find something else to like about these fascists. Like Hitler's elegant way of speaking. Or the way Mussolini says spaghetti. Number 9, Iron Maidens weren't actual torture devices used in medieval times. Basically what happened is, some archaeologists in the 1800s saw an old metal coffin and some spikes, and said, yo, wouldn't it be wildin' if we put these things up in here, so that way if someone goes in it, they get poked in their bits? You are a sick man, Cornelius. I like it. Into the museum it goes. At least Iron Maiden was real. They were as real as it gets. Still are. And don't you forget it. Number 10, Einstein never failed math. He had mastered both integral and differential calculus by the age of 15. 99% chance this one was just made up to make glue eaters feel better about themselves. Well, congratulations, Dimitri. Looks like you failed pre-algebra for the 3rd time. Brady still can't graduate. Well, hey, that means I'm still on par with famous smart science man, so yeah, worship me. So it just goes to show that we've all got a lot to learn about the world around us. That's why you need to go to Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes in technology, design, business, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. They've got great courses in graphic design and animation, which I've clearly already mastered. I mean, check this out. But I'm sure you could get a lot of use out of them. You can also learn plenty of more recreational skills, like how to solve a Rubik's Cube, or how to play chess really well. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today, with a special offer just for my viewers, where you can get 2 months of Skillshare completely free. To sign up, go to skl.sh/samo. Again, go to skl.sh/samo. to get 2 months of unlimited access to over 20,000 classes for free. Acting out for this.
Hey kids, it's Wildlife Wednesday. So today I decided to make some animal planets. No, not that Animal Planet. What I mean is, if you took every member of a certain group of animals and just rolled them into a single ball in space, how big would that sphere be? And I got some interesting answers, but before I show you my findings, I'll quickly go over my process. So first, I found the full population of a given creature or set of creatures. Then I would take the average weight of that creature and multiply the two together to get the total mass of that creature on Earth. To go from mass to volume, however, you still need the density of whatever you're measuring. Fortunately, the density of all animals is quite similar, partly due to the fact that the vast majority of creatures are at least 70% water by weight. Couple that with the fact that the ratio of fat, muscle, and bone or exoskeleton in all creatures is at least vaguely similar, and we can estimate the density of all animals to be around the same. Water is exactly 1 kilogram per liter, and then I'm throwing in a plus or minus 0.1 as a rounding error for the other material involved. As such, the values at play here are going to have 2 significant figures at most. I've included a link in the description to a spreadsheet with all my data and calculations. Quick disclaimer before we get started, a lot of this is based on estimation, particularly in the case of animal population. It's actually quite difficult to get a definitive count of a given animal on Earth, so all of the following is simply based on science's best guesses. Also, this is by no means a comprehensive list, it's just those that I could find the most reliable data on. One more clarification, the amount of specificity I give is the amount I applied to a given sphere, right? So whereas a blue whale sphere is just that one species, an ant sphere would cover all types of ants. That being said, let's roll. First up is the blue whale sphere. Although they are freaking gigantic, there is only like 10,000 of them on Earth. So the sphere only came out to around 140 meters in diameter. That's about the same height as the Great Pyramid. A bit larger than that is the elephant sphere, which came out to around 170 meters. Next up is the domesticated cat sphere at around 180. That's only slightly smaller than the Roman Colosseum, which was 190 in diameter. Next up is the camel sphere at around 260 meters. Slightly larger was the domesticated dog sphere at 280. Then the chicken sphere at 330. The horse sphere is at 370 meters in diameter. Larger than that was the ant sphere, which came down to around 420 meters. I almost didn't include this one as it is very difficult to find a definitive answer on ant populations. All the sources I found differed by like an order of magnitude or two, so I just averaged them out. Anyway though, imagine like falling back first into this thing and just having all the little minuscule creatures just consume you into their mass. Feeling itchy yet? You should. Anyway, this ball was just shy of the Empire State Building, which stood at 440. Next up is the sheep sphere, which got up to 650. Close to that is the Vatican City, which is 663 meters across. That means the Vatican is just big enough to hold all the sheep in the world. If that's not a metaphor, I don't know what is. Near the top of our list is the Antarctic Krill planet, which reached about 950 meters. The People planet was just a smidge larger at 960. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that there are 7.4 billion people in this sphere, it would only take 585 of them stacked toe-to-head to reach the height of the sphere. Anyway though, you'd think the human planet would be the largest since for our size we're so disproportionately represented on Earth. However, our largest planet is actually due as a result of our giant population, as well as our voracious appetite. The Cow planet, you see, is at a diameter of about 1.2 kilometers. That's around 2/3 of the length of the Brooklyn Bridge. So all this time you humans thought you ruled the Earth, when in fact we are merely the servants to our cow overlords. I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
Subjects have always been an important facet of science, since they allow us to study physiology in more destructive ways than we could get away with on humans. So it should come as no surprise that, over the years, there's been a lot of creatures haphazardly thrown at the cosmos against their will. Here's a bunch of smelly animals that achieved more in their short lives than you ever will. Quick disclaimer, this is by no means a comprehensive list, not even close, we'd be here all day if it was, more so just a highlight reel of the ones I found the most interesting. So the Great Zoo in the Sky was first founded in 1947 when the US launched a craft containing a bunch of fruit flies 68 miles into the air in order to see what kind of horrible mutants would get made from all the cosmic radiation up there. Unfortunately, they were totally fine, so the Earth was like, hey, living things can go into space and not die instantly, supple. And the next year they decided to send up a rhesus macaque named Albert, which it seems kind of like jumping the gun to go from barely alive specks to basically a person in one step. If it were me, I would have thrown like a frog or a gerbil in between there, but whatever, I'm no cosmopolitan. Anyway, Albert died of suffocation on the way up and never really made it to space alive. Fun fact, this rocket was actually a V-2 missile stolen from the Germans after World War II. So just in case any of you have any sympathy for those Nazi characters, they're technically responsible for the death of a poor innocent space monkey. Pretty condemning if you ask me. But I guess the US felt pretty bad about it, so they decided to deal with their grief by naming the next monkey Albert II. Pretty unhealthy coping mechanism according to my shrink, but she also thinks Punk is dead, so what does she know? This Albert actually made it into space alive through a grand effort incorporating all the incredible cutting-edge technology that the atomic era had to offer. And after all that, they goofed on the parachute, so Albert II turned into a fine red mist on impact, which just goes to prove the age-old adage, you can lead a monkey to space, but you can't make him land. There were a few more Alberts after this. Albert 3 fucking exploded. Albert 4 made it up, but he had another tissue paper parachute what don't work for heck, so he's out. Albert 5, yet again, bad shoot, liquefied on impact, until finally, in 1951, on Albert number 6, they figured out how to make a big blanket that consistently makes you not immediately die when you fall from the sky, and the monkey was recovered alive from the capsule, alongside his 11 mouse roommates. Of course, he died 2 hours later, but hey, still counts. Earlier that same year, Russia launched 2 little pupniks named Tsigan and Dzik, both of whom came back unharmed. These 2 were the first vertebrates to ever leave Earth and come back alive. Then in 57, the Reds snagged another achievement by putting the first living thing into orbit, besides the bacteria clinging to Sputnik 1, but they're losers, we don't talk about them. Specifically, they launched one brave and daring dog from the streets of Moscow, probably the most famous animal to ever go into space. You know its name well. That dog is, of course, Airbud. Unlike those other guys we talked about, Laika was never planned to be recovered intact, since we barely knew how to put something into orbit by this time, let alone bring it back. But they still wanted to make sure she stayed alive long enough to at least reach space. So before the mission, they put her through the most rigorous canine space camp that Russia had to offer, throwing her in a centrifuge for a while to get her used to G-force, making her cage progressively smaller to get her used to cramped spaces, which made her just not shit anymore at all, but that's a different story. They also switched her diet to a special high nutrition gel that she would have eaten after takeoff, had her brain not crapped out from overheating within the first few hours. In 59, the US strapped 2 monkeys to the nose cone of a Jupiter missile and actually got them back alive afterwards, which is crazy mostly because these things withstood 38 Gs of acceleration. For context, that's the force that makes even trained pilots lose consciousness times 4, or this thing times 12, or roughly the same forced experience when you realize that's not a normal speed bump, but one of those evil tiny ones that ruin your life, you know the ones. Well, that's what you get for doing 25 near a hospital, Sam. Well, hey, good thing I'm already here considering the ballistics test that just went down between the roof of my car and my frickin' skull. Jesus. So in 61, we graduated from monkeys to great apes, sending up a chimpanzee named Ham. Remember Space Chimps? Yeah, it was that. Frame for frame, Andy Samberg and all. What's special about Ham is that he was actually trained to pull levers and slap buttons while up in the ship, being rewarded banana pellets for completing tasks and getting his feet tased whenever he messed up. Sounds like a cartoon, I know, but I promise it's for real. Meanwhile, the Soviets were busy putting a big, bald, smart ape into orbit, no big deal. France saw the US and Russia sending up monkeys and dogs and felt left out, so in 63, they launched a cat into space and were like, yeah, that's cool and unique. I'm one of the popular kids now. In 68, the Soviets saw the rabbit making rice cakes on the moon and said, how about a tortoise for that hare, launching 2 of them into deep space, all the way around the moon and back to Earth, where they were recovered alive after their capsule landed in the ocean. Kinda cheating when you are your own crash suit, but an impressive feat regardless. In 73, we put mummy chogs in space. What's a mummy chog? It's one of these things. Like a fish, but real rough and tumble. Tolerates low oxygen, weird pressure, high salinity, dishwasher safe, Energy Star rated, you name it, sister. At first they could only swim in circles, but after a couple weeks, they actually adapted to 0G and figured out how to maneuver properly. Even more interesting, we also brought mummy chog eggs, and when these hatched, the little mummy choglets knew how to swim in 0G immediately. Kinda spooky, honestly. That same mission also sent up some spiders who managed to spin some webs. Trash webs, mind you, but hey, they managed. In 78, The Muppet Show aired Pigs in Space for the first time. In 85, we cut off the arms of a bunch of newts and sent them up to see if they grow back the same way. The reasoning behind this being, if a newt can't grow stuff back, then an astronaut with a paper cut probably can't either. Fortunately, they rearmed themselves at the normal rate, so all's good on that front. Around the same time, NASA actually had talks with Sesame Street about sending Big Bird up on the space shuttle as a publicity stunt. This is real. The plan ultimately fell through after they realized Big Bird is fucking giant and unwieldy at all times, literally the worst possible choice for a celebrity cameo on a space shuttle. So instead they sent a school teacher in his place. And then the Challenger fucking exploded. Let me reiterate. There is a timeline not too far from this one, where Big Bird is a casualty in the single worst astronautical disaster in history. A tiny evil part of me almost wishes that happened, like that's just so indescribably absurd. In the early 90s, we set up some baby jellyfish to grow up in space just for laughs. They figured out how to maneuver just fine, but when we brought them back down, they literally didn't have a concept of gravity and couldn't orient themselves properly in their new environment. Which, being a jellyfish is the easiest thing there is. You just kinda exist, maybe squirm a little now and then. So when you manage to somehow mess that up, you know things have gone seriously wrong. In 2003, the US sent up a bunch of invertebrates, including silkworms, spiders, carpenter bees, and harvester ants. Whoops, they exploded. In 07, some tardigrades went up, totally exposed to the vacuum of space for 10 days, which, surprise surprise, they were fine. On that same mission, a cockroach gave birth, creating the first organism that we know of to ever have been conceived outside of Earth. And finally, in 2018, Elon Musk sent a big basket of mice to the International Space Station. Just, 'cause he can. So those are just a handful of God's creatures who got to experience the majesty of not knowing up from down. If you're like me, you're probably a little jealous. Why does an ugly ape get to go into space, but I don't? I wish to bear witness to the music of the spheres firsthand, in a way that a lower creature could never appreciate. You know why you feel like that? Because you're a nerd. And what better way to fill that space-shaped space in your shriveled nerd heart than a vast collection of high-quality documentaries? That's why you need to try CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream was founded by the dude behind the Discovery Channel, and it's an absolute treasure trove if you're someone like me who feeds off useless knowledge like a loach sucking algae off a fish tank. And with over 2,400 titles, a lot of which are CuriosityStream exclusives, it'd be hard not to find something that interests you. I personally recommend Deep Ocean, The Lost World of the Pacific. There's some freaky things down there, like basically aliens. The whole thing's just one massive trip. You can get unlimited access to their full library for just $2.99 a month. I know it's a cliche, but that's literally less than a cup of Starbucks coffee a month. Also, you can get your first 30 days completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/salmonella and use promo code salmonella during the sign.
Hey kids, let me tell you a story. This is about something that happened when I was around 11. One day I was just walking through the woods with my dog, not a care in the world, when I see this guy approaching from the other end. He was all by himself, and he had a football. And every now and then he would just toss the football up in the air, catch it, and then keep walking. When I walked past him, he muttered something along the lines of, "Hey kid, you want some football?" I assume he was propositioning me to a game of catch. Or maybe he just didn't like that football very much, I'm not quite sure. But between this guy's strange nature and the fact that he was 17 and I was around 11, I turned him down. I took the dog home, and later that day, me and my friend were back at the woods, just hitting shit with sticks, I guess. I don't know, whatever kids do. We were mostly chilling in the same place, and a little ways in, I see the guy walk past again. I think it's a bit strange, but as he turns the corner, I neglect to mention anything to my friend about my previous encounter. Around 2 minutes later, I hear some grown man shouting angrily, and my friend and I turned to look. Somehow, we were so engrossed in our nothing we were doing, that we somehow failed to notice the giant plumes of smoke rising up from where that guy turned the corner. I'm talking huge, like if a member of the Vape Nation happened to see these clouds, he'd probably go into diabetic shock. The shouts were coming from our neighbor, whose house bordered on the woods, and he must have spotted the smoke before we did. So he's shouting things along the lines of,
What the fuck do you think you're doing? I'm gonna call the fucking cops on you. What is this?
That's when the guy goes fucking ballistic.
No, please! I don't want to go to jail! It was an accident!
And a few high-pitched screeches which I don't think I'm able to replicate. My friend and I walk over to get a closer look. We see the guy standing on the edge of this huge ground fire. I'm talking at least 10 meters in diameter. Pitch black grass, smoke rising up, flames still around the edges. Now this guy must have been like a Boy Scout or something, because, like I said, it was about a minute and a half between him turning the corner and hearing the guy shouting. Maybe the football was just a propane tank he painted brown. Could have been a pyromancer for all I know. It was about that time that my friend and I realized that, as two young, hip delinquents, it was not in our best interest to be standing in the near vicinity of a forest fire. So we skedaddled. As we heard sirens approach in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder what this guy's motive was. A few days later, I found out the guy lived somewhat nearby, and that he had mild autism. Yeah, that cleared a good bit up for me, because I have a couple friends on the spectrum, and they're good people, but sometimes they just do things. Nowhere near full-blown arson, mind you, more just along the lines of screaming fuck at the teacher and then walking out in the middle of class. But you get the idea.
Kids, do you like fashionable, high-quality apparel at an affordable price? Well, too bad, because that's not what we're talking about today. I'm gonna learn you all a thing or two about the real banana republics. Our story begins during the turn of the 20th century in Central and South America. Agriculture's kind of a big deal right now. You've got a ton of little plantations all over the place growing bananas, sugar, pineapples, that kind of thing. And they're doing alright for themselves, no big deal. But then refrigeration happened, and it changed everything. Because now produce could be kept fresh for way longer in transit, meaning the fruit companies could suddenly open up their business to the international market, their biggest new trade partner being the United States. This massive opportunity gave rise to three main companies, known as the United Fruit Company, Coyamel Fruit Company, and the Vaccaro Bros. By growing, shipping, and selling fruit, these three firms made just obscene amounts of money, a lot of which went towards buying out smaller family-owned farms and plantations. This allowed them to make even obscener amounts of money, until eventually the only competition that remained was each other. And then shit got real. The year is 1910. One of the companies I mentioned, Coyamel, was doing most of its business in the country of Honduras, when the president of Honduras, Miguel Davila, decided to give a land grant to the Vaccaro Bros in exchange for helping to build some roadways. In doing so, they basically stole a bunch of Coyamel's potential plantations and gave them to a competitor. So Samuel Zamuri, owner of Coyamel, said to himself, "Dang, I hate those guys. If only there was some way for a guy like me to significantly influence the world around him for his own personal gain." Wait a minute. So he used a portion of his McDuck-esque fortune to hire a mercenary army, which he gave to one of his friends, former Honduran President Manuel Bonilla. And together, they overthrew the entire fucking government of Honduras. Yeah. Should have called it Coyamel. Anyway, Bonilla took power and gave very generous concessions to Coyamel and United as thanks. But then America saw this, and they were like, "Hey, that's not very freedom of you, young man." To which Zemery replied, "It's okay, we're gonna help this country succeed. After all, politics and business are essentially the same thing." Well, I suppose it's not our place to be policing the governments of other nations, yet. Still though, maybe— Oh, also, nanners. Alright, I'm sold, do what you want. So with their interests secured, the businesses continued to thrive and expand. But since they got cut so many breaks by the government, very little of their commerce actually ended up benefiting Honduras as a whole. In fact, the national debt of Honduras got so bad that the government ended up not being able to perform a lot of its functions. So in response, the three fruit companies stepped in and said, "No worries, we got this," and decided to basically build the nation's infrastructure for them, including roads, railways, shipping lines, telegraphs, telephone lines, radio towers. They even switched the whole country off to the US dollar. Keep in mind, this wasn't out of the goodness of their hearts. It was mostly just to make their own businesses function more efficiently. But it was helpful either way. Anyway, now, not only did they have total power over their plantations, but also a monopoly over nearly every major industry in the country. Many other Central American nations soon followed this pattern, creating a corrupt sort of symbiosis whereby the fruit companies get huge tax breaks and land grants in exchange for a modernized infrastructure and payoffs to the rich minority. And so, the banana republics were born. Sounds like a pretty sweet gig, right? And it was. For the upper 5% of the populations who happen to hold some direct share in the plantations or shipping lines. For your average Jose, though, life mostly consisted of working on land that wasn't even theirs in exchange for dirt poor wages. So that's how things were for like a decade and a half. At some point, Coyamel was bought out by United, but then Zamore became the owner of the whole thing, somehow, and the Vaccaro company was renamed as Standard Fruit. Then one day, in 1944, the country of Guatemala had a democratic revolution, and the newly elected leader, Juan José Arevalo, wasn't happy with how the companies treated his people. So he implemented several reforms, like a minimum wage law and universal suffrage. And while the populace got a lot of benefit out of this, United Fruit most certainly did not. Because more rights for their workers means less profits for the business as a whole. Then Guatemala got a new president, Jacobo Arbenz, and he continued these reforms. And United continued to get the metaphorical shaft until finally, in 1953, they decided to go to the USA for help. "Oh, Eisenhower. Yo, what's up? This Jacobo guy, he's making us pay minimum wages." Well, that doesn't sound very good for business. That's not all, though. He's also taking our unused land and giving it back to the people. Does that sound familiar? Oh dear. You don't think? By the way it's looking, Dwight, I'd say he's a dirty— oh god— collectivizing— no. Commie. Commie! Commie! Yeah, go get him, Dwight.
Holy shit, you actually did it.
World Star! And from that point onward, Guatemala was ruled by a series of US-backed dictatorships, all the way up until 1996. This kind of situation happened in several other places and times as well, almost always driven by some combination of red fear and yellow love. I won't give any more details for the sake of time, but that doesn't mean they weren't big deals. So you might be wondering, where did these companies go? Surely the clan of banana shenanigans can't still be around today. Well, that's where you're wrong. They're still in operation, just under different names. Standard Fruit changed their name in 1991 to become none other than Dole Food Company. You know, when I was a kid, I used to play a lot of Super Monkey Ball, and I used to wonder, what kind of cruel tyrant would just stick an ape in a ball for their own amusement? Well, now I know. Those bastards. As for United, one day in 1976, their CEO decided he couldn't take the heat anymore, so he jumped out the fucking window. That's a real thing, look it up. Then some other guy bought the company and renamed it to, drumroll please, Chiquita Banana. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The face you once knew as an innocent, fun-loving dancer-slash-fruit merchant is actually a ruthless tyrant who overthrows democracies and undermines basic human rights for her own profit. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and kids. Remember the plague, malaria, smallpox? Kinda bad, right? Well, guess what? They're peanuts compared to the level of destruction that's been wreaked over the years across the kingdom next door. Today, I'm gonna talk about some of the most interesting diseases to ever strike the world of plants. The most famous one is probably the potato blight. It's a fungus that attacks potatoes. This is what it looks like. On the left, we have a healthy potato, while on the right, we have a blighty one. Notice how this one is noble and robust, like a lion's heart, while the other is shriveled and black, like Betsy DeVos's uterus. You could try to eat it, but it's basically like rotting cork. You wouldn't get very far. So in 1845, Ireland relied a lot on potatoes, right? That's because their soil was dumb, and that's the most nutritious thing they could grow. Then the blight came, and all their food turned to poo. 1 million starved, 2 million left. They came to America. They brought freckles, and these things. Hoity-toity-toy, now we have the Celtics. Next is the chestnut blight, which infects, you guessed it, the elderly. Wait, no, that's shingles. Chestnut blight infects American chestnut trees, which once populated a huge portion of the South and Mid-Atlantic regions of the country. Key word, once. During the early 20th century, the blight arrived, which ended up killing around 4 billion trees over the course of a couple decades. Hey, remember that time 4 billion giant things died inexplicably? Me neither. Nobody does. Let me give some perspective on the situation. Those trees were huge, like 40 meters tall apiece. That means 160 million kilometers of tree was destroyed by this disease. That's long enough to get from the Earth to the Sun with 10 million kilometers to spare. Here's another. If we take the volume of all these trees, we get 126 billion cubic meters. If we burn that much wood, we get 861 quadrillion joules of energy. That's the amount released by the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, times 10,000. So yeah, kind of a big deal. But who cares, right? Why worry about 4 billion dumb smelly old trees when there's 1,000 whole pandas that need our help? Isn't that right, WWF? You populist scum. Anyway, moving on. This next one is called, get ready, broom rape. I'm serious. Broom rape. Broom rape. Wikipedia, broom rape. Naked broom rape. Imagine if we gave human illnesses names like that. I'm sorry, Sam, but you have urethra cactus. I would just end it right there. Doesn't even matter what the actual symptoms are. Anyway, broom rape is considered a parasitic plant. This is what it does. The seeds of the broom rape will hang out in the soil for years until the roots of a host plant come along. When they do, the broom rape bursts out of its shell and immediately starts leaching off the other organism. Eventually, once they grow enough, they'll breach the surface with these little flowers. Notice, no leaves, no green. Who needs chlorophyll when you're a filthy freeloader, right? These flowers get fertilized and the whole thing starts over. Just one of these guys isn't a big deal to the host. But once you get enough, they have the potential to suck an entire farm dry, causing sweeping crop failure. Pun definitely intended. Next is this one. There's a few different ways you can pronounce it depending on your social standing, ranging from ergot to elgo. Being the disheveled pauper I am, I prefer ergot. Rolls off the tongue, you know. Ergot is a fungus that mainly infects grains like wheat, barley, and especially rye. And it's capable of producing a whole soup of compounds called alkaloids, which can have a variety of effects on the human body. Most of them not fun, mostly spasms and diarrhea, that kind of thing. However, one particular alkaloid called ergotamine structurally resembles LSD and has a similar function when it enters the body. So a medieval peasant would be sitting there, eating a nice nice loaf of rye bread, just minding his own business. Then all of a sudden, holy shit, I'm blasting out of both ends! My heart's a seizin', my lungs a wheezin', the fucking walls are melting, I can hear Satan's voice, he's telling me to invest in Apple? What does that mean? Why does he want me to buy apples? This would go on for like a day. Sometimes their fingers and toes would fall off, but then they'd be alright. Unless they weren't. Moral of the story, kids, don't eat strange bread. You could trip balls and die. One more thing before we end today's video, I've decided to launch a second channel for all the dumb stuff I think of that doesn't fit the Academy format. It's called Salmonella Vlog. Go check it out. It's in the description. I wrote a slam poem. It's there. Go look. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you. I hired to make this video while doing research on the ancient medicine man, Galen. Apparently, he would often do experiments on animals in order to learn more about the body, his favorite of which was the Barbary ape, due to its anatomical similarity to humans. Now when I say experiments, I don't mean push a button, get a peanut type things. I'm talking like Josef Mengele meets the plague dogs. He'd clamp their pee tubes shut just to watch their kidneys swell, cut their spinal cords in different places to see what went limp and what didn't, and squeeze their brains and make them go unconscious, to name a few. My initial reaction was, hey, that's neat, but then after some thought I was like, whoa, hold the phone. In 200 AD you couldn't get a doorknob even, yet if you had the right resources, you could order a goddamn monkey. Many monkeys, in fact. By the barrelful, presumably. Alternatively, if you were born in the right place, you could be the monkey poacher, making a living wrestling up some primates with nothing more than a net, a pokey thing, a hole in the ground, and a whole lot of ambition. So I got to thinking, what other kind of animals did ancient Rome have access to? Apparently basically everything that lived in this part of the map. They were particularly fond of elephants, and it's easy to see why. Sure, elephants aren't that big of a deal to the average person today, right? You've been seeing pictures of them since you were 2, big whoop. But imagine if you were a 20-year-old man who had never seen an elephant in your life. The closest thing you've ever witnessed is like horses, maybe some deer now and then. You get drafted, you go out to battle, you're a little scared, but you've been trained well, you're ready. Then, over the horizon, you see 20 house-sized behemoths with giant tentacles sticking out of their faces, horns longer than your body sticking out of their mouths, all screaming their weird trumpety scream, making your whole body vibrate like Mars himself is shitting on your very existence. So naturally, Rome loved to show these things off all the time, just as a display of power. Like, imagine if you were going to a speech in DC, and Trump rolls up with a pack of dragons. You'd listen to every word he said. He's got fucking dragons. That's what it was like seeing the emperor parade around with elephants back in the day. Of course, that wasn't the only use they had for imported animals. When they weren't being shown off in menageries, many of the exotic beasts brought to Rome were used in shows called venatios, which were basically like modern day bullfights, only instead of bulls, you had whatever crazy critters the state could find. Lions, crocodiles, gazelles, whatever. Around 55 BC, Roman statesman Pompey the Great decided to organize one such event, the feature creature of which was, you guessed it, an elephant. Unfortunately, Pompey forgot a crucial Barnum and Bailey trade secret. See, you're supposed to break the elephant's spirit before the show, not during. So the boys get to poking and the thing starts freaking out, just screaming and crying, even gesturing towards the audience like it was begging for mercy. Now the crowd at this kind of event was mainly composed of dirty, bloodthirsty peasants, and even they were like, holy shit, this is messed up. I came here for a nice, family-friendly disemboweling or two, but this, just deplorable. Then they all start crying and the whole thing just ends up being a huge mess. Anyway, these types of spectacles became larger and larger as time went on. It's said that Emperor Trajan once held a venatio lasting 120 days, during which some 11,000 animals were killed. They also got pretty elaborate. A lot of creativity went into keeping things fresh for the crowd. In 203 AD, they had a model of a crashed ship built inside the arena, and an assortment of 400 animals were set loose from the wreckage and then killed. That's what we should do for the next Super Bowl halftime show, honestly. Just pack every team's mascot into a decommissioned submarine. Then, when they all run out, we have the troops gun them down while the national anthem plays in the background. Anyway, the ingenuity of the people organizing these events really knew no bounds. One time they tied together a bear and a bull just to see what they'd do. Unfortunately, all that happened was the stock market crashed. Also, fun fact, one Emperor Commodus is credited with the invention of a unique crescent-shaped arrow designed specifically to decapitate ostriches and watch them run around headless for a while. Seriously, they did that so often that they needed a device to make the job easier. Sometimes, just to shake things up, they'd have the animals kill the people, which was known as damnatio ad bestias. This form of execution was typically carried out using lions, but other beasts were used as well, including dogs, bears, and at one point even an eagle, although the guy was crucified first, so it wasn't much of a fight. So, moral of the story, if you ever end up in ancient Rome and you want to see some animals, you'll still have access to almost all the same creatures we see in zoos today, and the only catch is that something has to
die at the end.
Kids, let me tell you about Swiss Miss Instant Hot Chocolate and why their packaging is bullshit. So it comes in a box shaped like this, right? And within the box there are individual bags of hot chocolate arranged like this. Already you can see some of this company's incompetence shining through. There is no reason for their box to be double wide. It is a waste of cardboard. Let me prove it. Here's a top-down view, right? Let's say this side is 8 inches, this side is 2 inches. That adds up to 20 inches of cardboard. If you doubled it up like this, just had the package a single file, that's only 16 inches. It's a waste. And if that weren't bad enough, for some reason they decide to attach the bags with these tiny paper bridges. So when you go to make your packet of hot chocolate, you have to detach the two bags. That doesn't sound so bad, except for the fact that it's impossible to break them cleanly. Every goddamn time, they tear holes into the sides of the bags. And it's never just one bag either. That would be too simple. It puts holes in both. So either way, you're gonna have to put one back and just live with it leaking powder in the box. It's gotten to the point where I have to employ surgical precision just to avoid getting chocolate dust all over my frickin' house. It would be so simple to avoid too. Even if you really had to have these pointless attachment things, you could at least put little perforations down the center so they break down the middle. School notebooks have been doing it since the 50s, so why, in 2016, has Swiss Miss not discovered the arcane technology of dotted lines? So there's powder everywhere. The cat's looking at you funny because it knows you're pissed off, but at least it's time to enjoy some hot chocolate. You pour your bag into the mug, pour in the hot water, take a sip, and it tastes like piss. Swiss Miss Instant Piss. So you go back to check the box, thinking maybe you did something wrong. The cat starts shaking because it knows what's coming, and that's when you see it. Serving size, 6 ounces. So finally the dam breaks, you unleash a primal roar of sheer fury. The cat shits itself and jumps out the window as you punt kick the Swiss Miss box across the room. The average mug is 12 fluid ounces in volume. Who in God's name only drinks 6 ounces of liquid? So finally, you reach into the box and pull out the desecrated corpse of that other bag from earlier, and you pour it in. Only then can you enjoy your subpar hot beverage properly. This whole system, right? This charade that Swiss Miss puts you through. It's kinda like telling a guy to just jizz with one ball instead of both of them. They're in the same container, and separating them would be difficult. And even if I were to figure out how to do that, 2 does the job better than 1 anyway, so it's pointless. Nowadays, I just fold the packet in half and rip along the seams of both. And maybe that was their intention, but if so, why would you give me the illusion of separability in the first place? It's like Siamese twins. They're joined for no reason and hard as fuck to separate, so I guess I'm just gonna have to live with both. I don't know which is worse, the fact this minor inconvenience was my biggest dilemma all day, or that this inconvenience even exists in the first place. But anyway, kids, it's That Happened Thursday, so today I'll discuss where different religious symbols come from. First up is Christianity. As most of you know, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified despite being supposedly sinless, so the cross is representative of his martyrdom. Personally, I always thought choosing the cross of all things to signify the whole religion was at least a little silly. Right, my prophet? He was a great dude, spread peace and love all along the land, performed many bountiful miracles, and then right at the end, he fell face first into a fucking bear trap and died. So that's our symbol, whole religion bear trap. Peace, love, compassion, and bear trap. Next up is the Jewish Star of David. It's been used now and then since the 11th century, but it only really got popular around the 1800s. There's no real special meaning behind it. They really just took a random symbol that was kind of around, called the hexagram, and made it their own. Bro, check out my new religious symbol. I'm pretty sure you didn't come up with that. Pretty sure that's a thing elementary schoolers do in their notebook when they're bored. Nah man, not once it gets popular. Then everybody will think of my religion when they see it. Whatever floats your boat.
Jimmy, what is this in your notebook?
Oh, it's just a little doodle.
Jimmy, listen to me. We are Catholics. Now get over here and erase this blasphemy.
But Mom,
Now!
Next is Islam. So, the star and crescent actually used to represent the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over most of the Islamic world during the 1800s. However, the empire dissolved after World War I, and its symbol was later adopted to represent Islam as a whole around the 1970s. Hey Rob, guess what? I'm starting a new baseball team. Isn't that the Chicago Cubs logo? Oh please, they're barely even a team. When's the last time they did anything? Nobody's using this symbol because nobody wants to buy their merchandise. Perfectly good logo. I'm taking it for my team. Couldn't that lead to a bit of confusion? only because they'll see a guy in a Cubs jersey who can actually catch a pop fly. Next up is Taoism. Alright, so the yin-yang, or as they call it, the Taijitu, actually applies to a lot of Asian religions, just the Taoists use it as their primary symbol today. It originated in China, dating back to the 11th century AD. Although it's had a lot of different looks over the years, it's always represented the same idea of balance between contrasting forces in the world. Okay, Carl, balance of good and evil. Let's see your design. Not bad, not bad. Alright, what about you, Steve? What the hell is that? Oh, well, you said balance between good and bad in the world, so I drew a grilled cheese sandwich shaking hands with a razor blade covered dildo. What? Okay, all other questions aside, why is a grilled cheese the best thing you could think of? Have you ever had a grilled cheese? Like a real one with butter just smeared all over it, crust nice and crispy, sprinkle some onions in there, get out. Okay. So you know how when people are meditating in movies, they do that obnoxious Om thing? Well, apparently, Om is actually the name of the popular Hindu symbol, and repeating its name aloud is said to be a sacred incantation, which is why it's said during things like rituals or yoga. The actual meaning behind the symbol is said to represent a load of different things depending on who you ask or when. Basically, whatever your purpose is, it's a one-size-fits-all prayer.
Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty.
This is taking forever. No, you know what? I'm gonna make my own religion, yeah. And our prayers, one syllable long. We're just gonna go ood whenever we feel like praying. That's it. Dinner table, ood!
But how will you get any meaning out of that?
It's my own word. I can give it whatever meaning I want. So I'll just give it all the meanings. It'll mean the soul, it'll mean the universe, it'll mean I don't have to recite any more long-winded bullshit. Anyway, pass the corn. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. At some point I'll do a second video covering some of the more obscure religious symbols. But until tomorrow, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
Start off with a little biology lesson. When a species finds itself living on an island, it can start to evolve in strange ways based on the different pressures applied by the new environment. This is called island syndrome, and while it can manifest in a lot of ways, the biggest driving force is often a lack of predators. For example, the dodo lost its ability to fly since there was nothing to flee from. The Saint Kilda field mouse got twice as big since it no longer had to hide. And with no one around to bully them, the Sardinians started putting maggots in their cheese. Meet kazumartsu, literal translation, rotten cheese. It's made by taking a perfectly good wheel of pecorino and letting a special type of fly lay eggs in it. The fly babies then work to partially digest the cheese, rendering it goopy and wet and maybe quite tasty and worm-filled. Now, cheese as a concept is already quite suspect. It's clotted milk that you fill with bacteria and mold and let sit for a while. But cheese is safe and delicious. Cheese is my friend. I trust cheese. So my guard would be down around kazumartsu. I've learned to look past a cheese's childhood. Strange upbringings are what give them their character. But it turns out, those maggots are still alive, and if you don't chew well enough, they can cause enteric myiasis, which is a fancy term for fly larvae living in your intestines. Symptoms are similar to food poisoning, except with the added psychic pain of knowing that, again, your bowels are full of squiggly new friends. It's for this reason that kazumartsu is banned in the EU and elsewhere. A black market still exists, which is wild, and it's not a small one. In 2019, the illicit kazumartsu trade was estimated to be worth 2 to 3 million euros annually. Personally, I would just do it prohibition style, like definitely don't put these fly eggs on this sumptuous wheel of pecorino. But if you do, you absolutely shouldn't keep it warm and damp for a week. But although it's traditional to leave the larvae alive when you eat your mag and cheese, some consumers still prefer them dead, shockingly. In that case, one puts the cheese in a sealed bag, and when the maggots run out of oxygen, they writhe around and fling themselves all over the place. This is heard as a distinct pitter-patter against the walls of the bag, and when the sound stops, the contents are ready to eat, like popcorn. Shark fin soup is one most of us have heard about already, mostly in reference to its effect on shark populations and the wastefulness that goes into making it. Until recently, though, I never looked into the nature of the dish itself. I figured, right, the fins are just the only part of the shark worth eating. Big whoop, it's probably not much different from, like, swordfish. Apparently, though, I had it backwards. Shark fins aren't even meat. They're made almost entirely of cartilage and collagen. They are the last part we should be eating. That's why it's only made into soup, because without being soaked in broth, it has
zero flavor or nutritional value on its own. Their only redeeming quality is their unique mouthfeel due to how stringily the collagen grows, in structures called ceratotrichia. The texture has been described as somewhere between chewy and crunchy, which I find describes most things, actually. Other adjectives present on Wikipedia include snappy, gelatinous, and sinewy. The exact sensation of eating this substance remains a mystery to me, and the unintended side effect of all this research is that I now really want to try it. Like, it's a big trade. I've got to be the one that's wrong. There is imitation shark fin soup available, but I've already decided that it's not nearly as good. So I've come up with a compromise to this controversy. Everyone on Earth gets just one bite. Say there's 10 bites to a fin, 4 fins to a shark, 200 million sharks die, sure, a necessary casualty, but then we can end the practice forever. All done. You can finally rest, Mr. Ming. Come here, baby. Aww. Aki. What? Aki. Where? Aki. The aki is a fruit originally from West Africa, which is most commonly associated with Jamaican cuisine, where it appears in such dishes as aki and saltfish. These alien kidneys here are called the arils, and they're the only part of the fruit that's actually eaten. The flavor is on the savory side, being described as kinda nutty or bean-like. What makes the aki controversial, though, is the effects it can cause when prepared improperly. If the arils are allowed to completely ripen, they're harmless, but if you eat them too early, or don't thoroughly clean off all the non-aril stuff, they can cause Jamaican vomiting sickness. This disease doesn't sound real, it sounds like it belongs next to Eastern sweats and Tangerian bone grindings, but that's actually an official term, and as for symptoms, it does what it says on the tin. Plus maybe death. While aki-based products aren't outright illegal in the United States, they are very tightly regulated, and the raw fruit itself cannot be imported. So if you're American and want to try it, your options are fully cooked canned aki or going to Florida where a few people grow it domestically. Next we have bird's nest soup. This is another one that I've vaguely heard of, and for years I just assumed the name was a playful metaphor like ants on a log or shit on a shingle. Turns out, nope, this dish contains an actual bird nest. Not like a pile of twigs like I was picturing, but rather a specific type of nest only made by certain species of swiftlets. These nests are mostly made out of mucins, which are a set of proteins that, among other things, serve to thicken all those wonderful secretions our bodies make. There's a little bit in human saliva, a little bit more in mucus, and in swiftlet saliva, look out, pal. So all the swiftlet does is it finds a nice wall, starts laying out fat strings of slobber, which dry, and eventually she's got a nice place to roost. That is, right up until some gourmand says,
Today I crave bird spit. You can keep the eggs though.
And they then reconstitute it back into its original gelatinous texture. Unfortunately, these nests can't enter the US since, believe it or not, eating bird saliva is a great way to catch bird flu. And now the time has come to speak of the ortolan. The ortolan is a kind of bunting, which is a sort of passerine, which is a type of bird. They're birds. Like many animals, they have a long history of being eaten by the French, but what separates the ortolan from your average squab or pheasant is the unique way in which it is prepared and eaten. They're typically caught with nets and kept in the dark, which causes them to overeat for some reason. Once it's about twice as fat, the entire bird is then thrown into a container of brandy, alive, and sealed in. While this serves to marinate the creature, it also drowns in the process, thereby killing one bird with no stones. The ortolan is then roasted, plucked, and presented whole to the consumer, who inserts the carcass into their mouth, feet first. As they chew, one hand continues holding the bird's head, while the other picks out the larger bones. This whole ritual is usually performed with a towel or large napkin over one's head. There's a few explanations for the purpose of the towel. Some say it's just there to keep the aromas in, while others say it's there to, quote, shield from God's eyes the shame of such a decadent and disgraceful act. Yeah, this one I'm okay with not trying, actually. Notable fans of this dish include, not joking, Bill Cosby and the guy who invented the lobotomy. To be part of that social club. Our mission is to eat birds whole and then make people not remember things. Killing ortolans was banned across the EU in 2007. Not for any ethical reason, but because French people did this so much that the
human spirit is a very powerful thing. With the right temperament, it can allow us to survive things you wouldn't believe. However, some people are stronger than others. For example, I've never so much as broken a bone in my life. Haven't been hospitalized since that first time 20 years ago. So I'm like 90% certain if I'm ever forced to dance with death, my soul's pussying out to the great beyond first thing. On the other end of the spectrum, you got guys like Phineas Gage. Gage was a 25-year-old railroad worker in mid-19th century Vermont. He and his crew were busy gang blasting rock to prepare the roadbed for a newly planned route. This involves a big hole being drilled into the ground, filled with gunpowder, and packed down using a tamping iron. Well, Well, being the gentleman and scholar that he is, Gage decides to lean forward and look directly into the hole, right? Now, the first rule of gun safety is to never look down the front of a gun. Everyone knows that. Gage basically just turned the earth into a gun and decided to put his head right in front of its gaping barrel, and wouldn't you know it, the powder goes off. The tamping iron shoots up into his cheek, moseys right on through his frickin' brain, and goes soaring out the other side, landing 80 feet away, all smeared with blood and thought juice. Now, by and large, Gage should have dropped dead immediately and been thrown into a ravine for his blatant disregard for OSHA regulations, and that would have been the end of it. But I guess Shiva Gautama Christ-chan, the one true god, decided Gage still had unfinished business down here on Shit Outta Luck 3, because after a few minutes of twitching on the ground, he got up, looked around, and thought, well, now's a good time as any for my yearly checkup. According to the doctor he went to, while Gage was retelling the story of what happened, he suddenly started vomiting all over the place, the effort of which, and I quote, pushed out about half a teacupful of the brain, which fell upon the floor. He didn't say what they did with it after. I'm picturing his dog just running over and immediately scarfing it down, then being plagued with the memories of a human railroad worker for the rest of his life. In the months following, Gage made a near complete recovery, physically anyway. He did lose a bit of his mind, which caused him to lose his mind a bit. Whereas Gage was once an upstanding, hardworking citizen, his untimely brain blast transformed him into an angry, incoherent drunkard, mumbling, quote, the grossest profanity whenever he deemed fit, and showing little to no regard for human life whatsoever. Naturally, he was fired from his job at the railroad, so Gage ended up wandering the earth, earning money any way he could. For a while, he hung out at Barnum's American Museum in New York City, basically making an exhibit of himself, standing there with the tamping iron like, hi, this went through my brain. Bye! He later had a stint as a farmhand in California and a stagecoach driver in Chile, which, I don't know who let the guy with severe brain trauma and no depth perception drive a vehicle, but whatever. Over time, he actually became a lot more functional, until finally, 10 years later, when his brain remembered, oh yeah, I shouldn't exist, leading to Gage having a bunch of seizures and dying at age 36. A similar story happened with one Ron Hunt in 2003. He was an American construction worker who was drilling a hole above his head, when the ladder he was standing on decided to give way, leading to Hunt landing face first on a 1.5-inch auger drill bit. The drill went straight through his left eye and out the back of his skull. To give you a reference of what 1.5 inches of drill looks like, here's the actual x-ray that doctors took when Hunt arrived at the hospital. Miraculously, the drill ended up just kind of pushing his brain out of the way, leading to no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Matter of fact, Hunt was perfectly lucid while the doctors tried to figure out the best way to take the thing out of his head. Initially, they considered cutting it out, but that would have been too messy, so eventually they decided to literally just unscrew it from his head, like, alright, hold him still now. Oh, you fucking MILF. Lefty Lucy. Does that mean the top or the bottom? What? It's a rotating circle. And, okay, you hold on for 1 sec. Look, one way the top goes left, one way the bottom. So which? Clearly the one on top. Why? Tell me why. Why clearly? Same reason north is up on the map. It's just common practice. Alright, well, sorry for not subscribing to your Eurocentric propaganda, Dan. You soggy cunt. Anyway, what were we doing? If you think Hunt was just a little too lucky with his incident, don't worry. According to Snopes, he was self-employed and didn't have insurance, so while the accident didn't ruin his life, you can sleep easy knowing that hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills and rehabilitation costs probably did. Our next tale revolves around Greg Rasmussen, a British-born animal conservationist who was studying wildlife in Zimbabwe. One day, he got reports of a highly endangered rhino being spotted in the area, so Greg took to the skies in a single-passenger plane to track the beast. Fate was looking down at Greg that day, and after a moment, it said, "No, rhino must die." And a huge gust of wind came out of nowhere, sending Greg into a tailspin, crash landing right in the middle of the untamed African bush. When Greg woke up, he found that his legs looked like used up tubes of toothpaste, so he was essentially trapped right where he was. Arguably worse than that was the fact that Greg was dehydrated before he even took off, hoping to get water at his destination. And just when things looked like they couldn't get any worse, they got worse. A group of elephants showed up and started harassing and straight up stampeding at Greg. With no other option, he starts banging on the wreckage as hard as he could. The elephants went, "Ha!" and decided to leave him alone. He was also approached by a pack of hyenas and actual lionesses on the hunt. But fortunately, animals are all morons, so the same trick worked on them too. Greg spent an entire day and night pinned under the wreckage, fighting off wildlife, severe dehydration, and extreme temperatures before finally being rescued the next morning. Incredibly, after over 100 operations, doctors managed to get Greggy's leggies up and running again. Although he was now 3 inches shorter, which is probably for the best, because now they can just stick the keys to the plane on top of the fridge so he never has another incident like this again. So moral of the story, us humans are resilient creatures who will do anything in our power to survive. And just as Greg Rasmussen banged on his destroyed plane to ward off predators in Zimbabwe, you should bang on your keyboard right now to ward off predators online with Dashlane. In this day and age, cybersecurity and privacy have never been more important, and only a select few people have the time, energy, and know-how to keep their data as safe as humanly possible. With Dashlane, you can take all your passwords and autofill data across all your devices and use the power of encryption to keep them out of the hands of lowly hackers. PC, Mac, iOS, Android, Chrome, Safari, Abacus, doesn't matter, Dashlane's got your back. No, Dashlane does not offer services for rudimentary mechanical calculators. Something especially cool is that you can actually change your passwords right in Dashlane without that whole chain of, okay, reset. Which email? Who knows? What's my favorite beverage? Well, I know 14-year-old me didn't say whiskey sour, so I guess I'm screwed. Dashlane Premium even comes with a VPN, so now you can take full advantage of unsecured Wi-Fi without your Neopets ever falling into the greasy hands of the lowlifes at Comfort Inn. So please, go to dashlane.com/salmonella to try Dashlane for free today. Also, the first 200 people to use the promo code SALMONELLA will get 10% off their Dashlane Premium subscription. That's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella. And we all know that fate is a fickle thing. Some of us may try to defy its will, but there's enough small businesses with Pizza Hut roofs out there to tell you that such a thing is ultimately futile. As for most of us, we tend to have our fair share of good and bad luck throughout our lives, but every now and then, RN Jesus smiles upon some drooling little loaf child and says,
"You, my son, you shall be the one with all the figgy pudding."
That child was Timothy Dexter. Dexter was born in Malden, Massachusetts in 1747. He had a humble upbringing, dropping out of school as an 8-year-old to work as a farmhand and a leather worker. But Dexter thought he deserved better, so when he grew up, he married one Elizabeth Frothingham, a rich widow in need of company. Gold digging achieved, he began his quest to become a true aristocrat. As his first step, he thinks, all the rich guys I know are in positions of power. I should run for office. Now, the town of Malden wasn't much keen on appointing a bumbling second-grade dropout, but after rejecting dozens of petitions sent in by Dexter, they eventually gave up and decided to just make some shit up, leading to Dexter becoming the official informer of deer, tasking him with keeping logs on the local deer population. And over statistics of does and bucks alike, Dexter ruled with an iron fist, triumphantly concluding what many had already known: that there weren't any deer in Malden, Massachusetts. Satisfied with his political career, Dexter then set his sights on greater financial ventures. So a little history, in 1775, as part of our growing independence from Britain, the Continental Congress decided to establish their own currency, known as the Continental Dollar. Real creative there. Then the Revolutionary War started, and it dawned on people that these pieces of paper wouldn't be very useful in a giant pile of wet tea and smoldering patriots, causing their value to do one of those horny eagle death spirals. Then the Congress did, that stupid thing that every high schooler learns is stupid, not invading Russia in winter but the other one, practically making them worth less than their weight in paper and ink. And wouldn't you know it, a good portion of the Continental Army was paid with these, so by the time the war ended, many veterans were left totally destitute. The aristocrats were like, well, these grass-eating Untermensches did kind of give us a country, so whatever, we'll throw them a few cents and take this trash off their hands. Dexter was like, ooh, I'm a wealthman, I'm gonna do that too. And he spent the majority of his savings buying a boatload after boatload of the 1780s equivalent of Blockbuster gift cards. By all accounts, this should have been his ruin, but by some stroke of luck, after the Constitution was ratified, the new government decided that they'd trade Continentals for treasury bonds worth 1% of their face value. Doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, Dexter bought thousands of crates of bills for fractions of pennies apiece. So as buybacks began across the country, his stockpile appreciated massively in value, and this informer of deer realized that, for the first time, there were a lot of bucks in Malden. But just because he was now a man of the upper crust doesn't mean he let it go to his head. Sure, he might have purchased the most luxurious chateau that money could buy, through daily Playboy Mansion-style ragers, and commissioned over 40 statues of America's greatest heroes, one of which was of himself, with a plaque calling him, quote, the greatest philosopher in the Western world. Despite his incredibly tacky displays of wealth, his contemptuous contemporaries still saw him for the loud, illiterate rube he was. So they started giving him deliberately awful investment tips in order to get him to bankrupt himself. One such piece of advice was that he should ship warming pans to the Caribbean. For those of you born after 1850, a warming pan's this dish on a long pole that you fill up with hot coals to warm up your bed. Not much use in a tropical paradise. But Dexter was undeterred by such frivolous things as logic. Went ahead and sent over 40,000 of them to the West Indies. When they arrived, the locals didn't really know what they were looking at and decided to use them as ladles for the sugar and molasses refineries. And by the end of it, Dexter sold every single one at a markup of nearly 80%. Frustrated that their plan backfired, the elites then told him to literally carry coal to Newcastle, which is an old idiom used to describe a pointless task based off the fact that Newcastle was one of the world's biggest producers of coal. The only idioms Dexter knew about all involved different animals shitting in the woods, so he took their word on good faith and went along with it. But by some divine providence, by the time the shipment arrived, the Newcastle coal miners had all gone on strike, and Dexter once again cleared the entire shipment with a hefty profit. He was like, man, I am so smart. By this point, he was pretty confident in his speculation skills, so he started making seemingly far-fetched ventures all by himself. One time he had a bunch of stray cats rounded up for basically free, which sounds like herding cats, but what do I know? And he sent them to the Caribbean, where they were gobbled up en masse. Not like eaten, but purchased to deal with all the rat infestations. In another instance, he bought up just about every whalebone in Boston. And coincidentally, at the same time in France, men started wearing corsets too for some reason. Demand went way up, Dexter's laughing. Now, from an outside perspective, at the end of the day, Dexter was a very shrewd merchant. So at this point in my research, I was like, wait a minute, is he smart? Then I learned about his life outside of business. Dexter considered himself extremely knowledgeable on just about every topic. Keywords, considered himself. For example, he once stumbled upon a guy painting a sign to go along with the newly built statue of Jefferson, and when he saw that the sign called Jefferson the writer of the Declaration of Independence, Dexter lost his frickin' mind and insisted that Jefferson did not pen the DOI, but rather the Constitution. Spoiler alert, not remotely true, he was in France at the time. An easy mistake to make today, sure, but this was only like 10 years after the fact. That's like someone today saying, Obama didn't kill Bin Laden, dumbass. That was Bill Clinton. Anyway, when the painter refused to change the inscription, Dexter started shooting at him with a long rifle until he complied. Real genteel. Dexter made sure to surround himself with the requisite number of weirdos to maintain this level of delusion, one of which was Jonathan Plummer, a man whom Dexter paid to be his poet laureate, writing only the most laudatory odes in his honor. Mind you, this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill, wise-and-wizened wordsmith. Jonathan sold fish for a living. And porn. He just kind of went along with the whole thing for the pocket change. Besides his entourage, Dexter occasionally spent time with the total geeds known as his family. He had 2 children, whom the New England Historical Society describes as a half-mad drunk and a completely mad drunk, respectively. And he couldn't stand his wife on account of her perceived constant nagging, to the point where he would tell guests he was unmarried and that he just had a ghost in his house. Just like, oh yeah, that's a sea hag. You know, mansion built on some old Indian shipwreck or something. Timmy, please, I'm cold and my hands are rheumatic. Find it in your heart to light the fireplace for me. Yeah, plenty of that in hell, you banshee bitch. One day, in a massive stroke of ego, Dexter decided to fake his own death, complete with a lavish funeral service just to see who would show up. Lucky for him, about 3,000 people from all walks of life turned up. Though initially staying out of sight, he soon noticed that his wife wasn't crying. So in response, he jumped out and started hitting her upside the head with a cane in front of everybody. But as his true mortality grew closer, Dexter knew he needed a legacy and decided to pen his memoirs, titled A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, which was basically just 20 pages of unhinged ranting about politics, religion, his wife, and whatever else came to mind. No punctuation, random capitalization, the most amazing spelling I've ever seen. Here's some excerpts. George Washington. Attitude, philosopher, tobacco, general. And this is all just from the first few lines. The entire book is written like this. And just like everything else the guy did, the thing sold like fucking hotcakes. Why does anybody even try? The best part is that when he got complaints about the total lack of grammatical anything, in the second edition of the book, he put an extra page at the end full of nothing but punctuation marks, with a little note saying that anyone who felt like whining could just stick them wherever they wanted. Dexter died in 1806, and by and large, he probably should have ended up in Davy Jones's locker, but given the circumstances, I imagine the big man upstairs dropped his big deck of mortal soul trading cards at just the right moment, letting him slip through the pearly gates undetected. And legend has it that to this day, if you pray to the name Timothy Dexter, he'll look upon you kindly and share his skills with you all. Wait a minute. Share? Skill? Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. If you're like me, you're probably tired of sitting in a festering miasma of boy stink and jewel clouds all day. Such a thing could be easily remedied with a houseplant known to improve air quality, but you don't know which few species can survive on what meager light slips through the cracks cracks of your squalid cave. If you give happy houseplants a try, I'm sure your dorm or apartment will start to show signs of non-insect life before you know it. Join the more than 7 million people already learning today with a special offer just for my viewers. While Skillshare is normally less than $10 a month, everyone who visits the link in the description can get 2 months of unlimited access to their 25,000 plus classes for absolutely free. So please, quit your public McTuition and get your private free tuition today. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam.
Kids, today I'm going to talk about the different kinds of straws. So first you got straw. This was the first kind of straw to be used by humans. Many of this straw is still called straw because it was discovered before plural nouns were invented. Good for roofing, good for feeding livestock, and it can also be used to make straw men, which are good for holding back society. Straw rating, 6 out of 10. Then there's classic straws, a beverage conduit incredibly simple in form, yet highly effective in function. In fact, these devices have caused me to create a new philosophical principle. I call it Onella's straw. It's totally identical in every way to Occam's razor, except for the fact that it only applies to straws. Anyway, straw rating, 10 out of 10. Next on the food chain are bendy straws. These are proof that just bending something a little can make it that much better. Bend a breadstick, you got a pretzel. Bend a sword, you got a scimitar. Bend the rules, you got a badass. Bend the truth, you got a nomination. Bend a straw, and you've got, a slightly more convenient straw. Straw rating, bendy 10 out of 10. Next is the last straw. I don't really know what it looks like. All I know is that it makes girls never talk to me again. Straw rating, cry wank out of 10. Then you got crazy straws. In the words of Dr. Ian Malcolm, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, that they didn't stop to think if they should. This quote is frequently misattributed to having been talking about bringing dinosaurs back to life, when in reality he was talking about the invention of the crazy straw. The crazy straw is a perfect example of humanity's tendency to overdo things just to get our sick kicks. When my gaze falls upon a small child across the room at Olive Garden, gently sipping chocolate milk through a crazy straw, all I see is a misguided youth wasting his life. Straw rating, 9 out of 10. So after all this, I figured, hey, if we already got the crazy straw, we might as well double down here. So I invented something that goes beyond just crazy. I call it the menace to society straw. Patent pending. Straw rating, fuck you, God is dead. Out of 10. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella. Little Jimmy. Yeah, what's up? Do you like Pirates of the Caribbean? Yeah, it's alright. So do you think it'd be fun to be a pirate? Yeah. Well, guess what? You couldn't be more wrong. Oh, fuck. Yeah, I know. At some point, every kid has dreamed about being a swashbuckling, corn-shuckling, wife-cuckling, cocksuckling pirate, but trust me when I say, it was really not all it's cracked up to be. First, we'll talk about the food. So one staple of the pirate diet was salted meat, usually wild oxen or pork. And I love jerky as much as the next guy, but this wasn't like a bag of Jack Links. In fact, it was probably closer in texture to your shoes than any meat you've ever eaten. In those days, you couldn't just snap into a Slim Jim. That's a modern luxury that we take for granted. Back then, the slogan was, gnaw on a Slim Jim for minutes on end, grinding it between your molars while the gallons of salt turn your mouth into a desert until the mangled hunk of flesh in your mouth is just soft enough to be shoved down your greasy fucking pirate throat without tearing a hole. Another essential food item was known as hardtack. This was essentially just flour and water baked into a cracker-like brick. Beyond the fact that it was totally flavorless, hardtack was also extremely dense, to the point where pirates would often have to slam their fists down on it in order to break it into pieces small enough to fit in their mouth. As long as it was kept dry, hardtack almost never spoiled, although it often became infested with weevils. Excuse me, sir? I'm a vegan, so can I have a new piece? One without any of Mother Nature's beautiful creatures in it? Thanks. Wait a minute, is this gluten-free? This better be hemp rope. Nah, but the weevils didn't make you sick or change the taste all that much, so, and this is true, the crew would just eat it in the dark, so that way they couldn't tell if they were eating a normal chunk or a weevily one. Then there's the crowding. So pirate ships typically packed in as many crew members as possible, because more pirates means more manpower when you go to board an enemy ship. Of course, the downside to that is that you're basically like a bunch of hairy, unwashed sardines. Let me illustrate what a typical night below deck was like. So you're sprawled out on the damp, musty wood floor. Everything's pitch black, you can't see a thing. The smell of the filth and the mold forces you to only breathe through your mouth. Suddenly, your left hand feels wet. Probably just seawater leaking through the hull. You sniff your hand, nope. No, that's piss. You feel something furry rub up against your elbow. It was either the body of a diseased rat or the beard of your diseased crewmate. Either way, that's probably where the piss came from. Some guy's moaning loudly in the next room. Hopefully he's just jerking off, because if he's dying, that's one more body to deal with in the morning. Rinse and repeat for 8 hours, and then it's daytime. The poor diet and cramped conditions led to disease being a huge problem aboard pirate ships. The most well-known of these diseases is scurvy, where you don't get enough vitamin C. When scurvy first begins, you just kind of feel tired all the time, no big deal. Then you get weird spots on your skin and your gums start bleeding. This progresses until all your teeth fall out and all of your body's mucous membranes start gushing blood and pus, causing you to die. So that's a lot of fun. There were tons of other diseases too. I won't go through them all, but here's a few honorable mentions. Also, some people say that alcoholism is a disease. I might just be disturbed, but that's one sickness I could definitely get down with. If it is a disease, then yeah, just about every pirate had this one. If anything though, I'd call that one of the few upsides of pirate life. Finally, there's the combat. So you've gone through all these disgusting, horrible living conditions, but at least you can enjoy the thrill of battle, right? Swinging from rope to rope, sword in your mouth, long, intense saber duels, that kind of thing. But that's typically not how it went down. For one thing, when pirates boarded a ship, 9 times out of 10, they'd just surrender immediately. Because what are a bunch of well-groomed merchants gonna do against a horde of disgusting barbarians? If the defending ship did decide to fight back though, the resulting brawl wouldn't be anything like the movies. It'd be way worse, like immediate R rating. Because pirates rely a lot on brutality, both because they don't have much real training, and because it scares the shit out of people. If you were a deckhand on an invaded ship and you were stupid enough to fight back, you wouldn't be dancing around doing flips and shit, none of that. Instead, they'd probably shoot you in the stomach with a flintlock pistol, kick you to the ground, chop off your shoulder blade with a hand axe, gouge out your eyes with a marlin spike, wind your intestines around the prow, and then toss your twitching body overboard. And that's only a slight exaggeration. Honestly, if Jack Sparrow got attacked by actual pirates, he wouldn't last a second. It's kinda like a used car salesman going to prison, like, "I'll be fine. If anybody tries intimidating me, I can get out of it with my quick wit and charming personality. Boy, you look real pretty from behind." Oh wow, I'm boned. So yeah, in short, if you were thinking about pulling a Captain Phillips anytime soon, I'd advise against it. That's all for today.
Kids. As you know, many people struggle with weight management. Usually that means they can't keep the pounds off. But if you're like me, you might struggle with the opposite problem. Seriously, this drawing is only a slight exaggeration. So, I'm gonna teach you how to turn that dank lankin into skank bankin. Quick disclaimer, I am not a nutritionist, I'm mostly talking out my ass here, but I'm reasonably sure that most of the claims I make in this video are factually correct. Alright, let's do this. Tips Tuesday! Tip number 1, eat a da meat. It builds muscle. You know why? 'Cause it is muscle. I'm talking the beef, the pork, the chickie. It's all good. There is no better source of dense protein out there. Tip number 2, peanut butter. Any nutritionist can tell you that a balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats is necessary for a healthy diet. Peanut butter is that balance. Very calorie dense as well, about 90 in each tablespoon. You're gonna wanna opt for chunk style rather than smooth, as it is closer to raw peanuts. Tip number 3, no coffee. But Sam, you say, I need the coffee for my energy. Well, guess what? That's a bunch of pussy bullshit. A man should be running on pure willpower alone. Coffee is a stimulant that makes you waste energy. It makes you poop, waste the nutrients. And it's an appetite suppressant, so you can't stuff your gut as good. Tip number 4, supplement with fats. Making spinach? That's good. It's got the nutrients. But it's also got like 6 calories total. Throw a tablespoon of butter on top of it, and suddenly you up to 106 calories. Don't go with just butter though, it might turn you into a racist. I'm Paula Deen. Instead, diversify your oils. Olive, peanut, coconut, especially coconut, pop that shit on potato, that's the fazool. Just don't drink crude oil or else you will die. Or turn into a billionaire, but I wouldn't risk it. Tip number 5, milk. It's like water, except better, 'cause it's got proteins and lactose. But Sam, I don't want my friends seeing me drinking milk. That's what children do. I will punt you over my house, 'cause that is more pussy bullshit. They might laugh now, but they won't be laughing once they see your sick gains. Just don't drink milk all the time. You could die.
Okay, probably not, but milk is not too good a hydrator, so just drink water too. Do both. Both is good. Tip number 6. Eggs. Protein good for chicks. Protein good for attracting chicks. Now the egg consists of 2 parts, as you know, the yolk and the white, also known as the albumin. However, the Al Pacino is not nearly as dense as the yolk as far as calories and proteins are concerned. So if you wanted to get technical, you could ditch the Alpine Ridge and just eat the yolks. You won't miss out on much, as the pair have similar protein contents, just the Al-Qaeda also has a lot of water weight. In conclusion, egg whites are for gays. That's why they look like G. Tip number 7. Hey Junior, what you drinking there? Pepsi? Are you shitting me? Tip number 7, no sodas. They contain empty calories, for one. Secondly, carbonation is a waste of space. Produces gas, wastes valuable stomach space, so you can't eat as much. You know why they call it pop? It's 'cause I'll pop a cap in your ass if I catch you drinking it. Tip number 8, most important, exercise. This is the sole tip that separates the fit fucks from the fat fucks. Obviously you're gonna want to lift, but you should definitely get some cardio in there as well. But Sam, you say, everybody knows that cardio kills gains. I will punt you into the stratosphere because that is more, say it with me, pussy bullshit. Sure, an hour of jogging might lose you 400. Kids, let's talk about babies for a second. Now, I think we can all agree, generally, babies suck at most things, either literally or figuratively. They have almost no life skills whatsoever. However, as it turns out, babies do actually have some traits that make them superior to adults in certain isolated aspects. In this video, I'm going to tell you guys about a few. First is the baby's non-drowning reflex. If babies under the age of 6 months are put underwater, they'll instinctively hold their breath. Additionally, their heartbeat begins to slow down as soon as they're submerged, which allows them to use much less oxygen and, as a result, stay alive much longer than the average person. As we all know, babies get themselves into bad situations all the time. Soon as your back is turned, they're off trying to lick another socket or whatever. So this reflex probably evolved from back in the day, right? Mom's off picking berries, baby wanders off, ends up in the middle of a lake, and somehow this whole reflex thing gives the village more time to, go get a raft and fish them out. Next is a baby's grip. They're able to support their entire body weight with just one hand, which is more than a lot of adults can do. Of course, it's kind of cheating because they only weigh as much as a baby, but it's still kind of impressive. This trait is shared by apes, whose babies instinctively cling on to the backs of their mothers. So that way, if she gets a little courageous swinging from branch to branch, the baby doesn't just go flying. Anyway, because of this, it's speculated that babies actually got their firm grasp from our ape ancestors millions of years ago. And it's only a bit later in life when your genetics go, oh yeah, legs neat, and ditch the whole grabby thing. Next, babies are also very seductive. Not in the sense of like strutting around in thigh highs, making dudes' eyes bulge. Not that seductive, but just in the sense of, hey, I like looking at this thing. We should keep it alive for a while. Here's an example. If people saw a 5-year-old on the streets rolling around in a pile of its own shit, they'd be like, ugh, what a scumbag. But if an infant did it, people would still be like, oh man, little guy, I want to take you home, clean you up, put you in little hats. Yeah, it has to do with a baby's facial features, like their large forehead and eyes, which set off a bunch of baby caring instincts in our brains, causing us to perceive cuteness. It's only when they hit like 2 or 3 when that all goes down the shitter. Lastly, babies have a surprisingly good concept of morality. According to a study by Yale University's Infant Cognition Center, babies are born with an innate sense of right and wrong. Here's how the study went, right? So first they put on a puppet show for the baby, with these 2 rabbit dolls, and they made one of them act nice and the other one act like a dick. Then at the end of the show, the babies were offered either puppet, and in almost every case, the babies took the nice one. And you might say a strong grip on morality doesn't qualify as a superpower. Personally, I disagree. People are terrible at keeping their basic sense of right and wrong unless their society maintains it for them. Let me give an example. A few days ago in the Philippines, the president of the entire country basically said, hey, we should just start murdering every drug addict alive. Right now. And this isn't seen as insane over there. No. Millions of Filipinos are now on board with this. It is fucked. You see, babies lack the mental capacity to justify atrocities with shit like it's about the greater good, They have no prejudice. They just see people as people. And honestly, I think we could all learn a thing or two from that. Not to get all George Carlin-y on you guys or anything. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
You're probably familiar with at least a few characters whose obsessive penny pinching truly knows no bounds. Yes, from Ebenezer Scrooge to Scrooge McDuck, nobody hoards money quite like misers. But these guys aren't the most miserly misers out there, not by a long shot. First of all, look at their top hats, their extravagant use of glasses, their luxurious chairs. These things are worth their weight in precious shekels. No true miser would waste their wealth on such frills. Second of all, these guys aren't real. They're fictional characters. Scrooge McDuck does not exist. I don't care what CNN says, it's all liberal conspiracy bullshit. I mean, look at this article by the Huffington Post. You mean to tell me that this picture isn't photoshopped? Ridiculous. But you know who was real? One Daniel Dancer of London, England. Born in 1716, Daniel's father died at a young age, leaving behind a large agricultural estate for Daniel to oversee. When it was first inherited, the property brought in a few £100s a year, which doesn't sound like much today, but given that a general laborer could be expected to make around £19 per year in 1710, it's safe to say that Dancer could afford to live a fairly lavish lifestyle off his passive income alone. But Dan was like, you know, all this food and clothing and stuff is alright, but you know what I really like? Owning money. Say, how much does a pound cost? Well, that's a complicated question, Daniel. Can currency really be said to have intrinsic value? Some economists believe that— TLDR, please. They cost a pound. Jesus, that's a lot. I better start saving. Thus began one of the most intentionally frugal lifestyles history has ever seen. Let me walk you through a few of Dancer's day-to-day habits. First of all, soap, don't even think about it. The closest thing to bathing that Daniel did was during the summer months when, once or twice a week, he'd wade into the nearby pond and scrub his face with a handful of sand. Say what you will, but what he lacked in deodorization, he certainly made up for in exfoliation. Admittedly, all of London probably reeked to high hell back then, so while Daniel's smell might not have tipped people off to his eccentricity, his clothes almost certainly did. On a good day, he'd be seen in one of his coats, which were homemade patchwork abominations of various garments that Dancer found on the streets and local dust heaps, looking like a walking dementia patient sewing circle. Similarly, all his shoes were either scavenged or Frankensteined out of other pairs of shoes he already owned, with the whole ensemble being barely held together with haphazardly tied bands made of the hay grown on his estate. In fact, a lot of the time, he'd ditch normal clothes altogether and just wear the hay. To his credit, in his youth, Daniel was known to purchase a whole 2 shirts per year as his clothing expense, but one day he looked in the mirror and said, "Daniel, you're bleeding funds like a stuck pig. It's time to grow up and get your act together," and cut his budget to only 1 shirt per year. One of the few people that Daniel associated with regularly was his sister, whom he lived with. Believe it or not, she shared in a lot of Daniel's tight-fisted habits, and it definitely showed. She was described as, quote, having more the appearance of a walking dunghill than one of the fair sex. Couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. Dancer prepared all of his food for the upcoming week ahead of time, consisting of only 14 hard dumplings and 3 pounds of beef stretched out over the entire 7-day period. Every day, he'd eat only a single meal that was basically equivalent to 2 wads of dried out dough and 1.5 quarter-pounder patties from McDonald's. He kept this habit up for years without fail, except for one time when he stumbled upon a fully intact, rotting sheep carcass during his daily stroll. He was like, "Good lord, this is just obscene. Who would leave a perfectly good pile of arguably edible meat and organs just sitting around like this?" So he dragged the thing home and made him and his sister a nice big pile of spoiled mutton pies, which they subsisted off of for several weeks. That's a real life hack right there. Who needs refrigeration if it's already rancid, am I right? Despite Daniel's rabid fear of any unnecessary spending, he did own a dog named Bob that he was quite fond of. At this point, I'm almost certain that Dancer just decided to base his entire life off of linoleum by no effect, which is pretty incredible considering linoleum wasn't even invented for another 100 years. Anyway though, one day, Daniel's neighbor came to complain about how Bob had been harassing his sheep. So Daniel said, "Don't worry boy, I ain't gonna kill you, but we don't want a lawsuit on our hands, do we?" "No we don't. What would we do if a lawyer came around here, huh?" "That's right, and make his children watch, yeah." So he decided to take the dog to the local farrier, which is basically a blacksmith that specializes in horseshoes and the like. "Hey, could you make my dog, like, not have teeth anymore?" What kind of business you think I'm running here, boy?" "Come on, man, you file down horses' hooves for a living. Teeth are just tiny mouth hooves. That's close." "Sorry, buddy, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades."
Well, got me there. Say, what's a hand grenade? None of my sources say what happened to the dog after his untimely nubbening, but I do know Dan never got sued, so I guess the operation was a success. Daniel's sister passed away in 1766, leaving him so distraught that he actually went out of his way to buy mourning clothes for her funeral. And by that I mean he bought a pair of secondhand black stockings, and that's it. Still, that's a big deal when it comes to the likes of Dancer. At this point, the only person close to a friend that Dancer had was a woman known as Lady Tempest. She was so influential over him that she was actually able to convince him to buy, get this, a 1-shilling hat. This was quite an accomplishment, as Daniel's last hat was older than half of you at 14 years old. What? I'm not! You don't!
Meow.
You. Of course, the next time Lady Tempest went to hang out with him, he was still wearing his old disgusting hat. When questioned about the one he bought, he goes, "Oh yeah, that frilly old thing. Sold it for a 6 pence profit. Super easy too. I tell you, forget house flipping. Hat flipping's gonna be the cool new thing pretty soon." Lo and behold, 250 years later, he was wrong. Daniel died at the ripe old age of 78, which seems pretty shocking considering the whole not using soap, eating rotten food thing, but I guess his near total isolation from other people made up for that when it came to preventing illness. Though he never ended up shelling out any of the massive hoard of wealth that he accumulated over this time, his efforts weren't completely in vain. By the time he passed away, Daniel's estate was now pulling in about £3,000 in yearly net revenue, 10 times the amount it earned when he first inherited it. So, moral of the story, parsimony has its place. While it's good to save money, don't torture yourself just for the sake of a few bucks. Next time your parent or significant other insists on turning down the thermostat or keeping the windows up to save gas, just say, hey, are we human or are we Dancer? But you know what else is more valuable than money?
Knowledge.
That's why you need to try Skillshare.com. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 23,000 classes in technology, design, business, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. Want to learn how to budget your life without turning into a filthy carcass-eating loner? Try the Core 4 of personal finance. You'll learn all the money management skills that really should be taught in school but aren't in no time. If you're looking for something a little more ambitious, it's never too early or too late to try your hand at entrepreneurship. With some of these classes, you can turn that one genius business idea that you and your friends had that one night into reality. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers, where you can get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. To sign up, go to skl.sh/sam04. Again, you, yes, you with the eyebrows, go to skl.sh/sam04 to get 2 months of unlimited access to over 23,000 classes for less than $1 technically.
A day? Well, could be worse. You could be living in a world without modern anesthetic. Today, we'll be talking about some surgical procedures carried out long before the development of medicine as we know it today. Now, once you go back a certain distance, the line between operation and mutilation is pretty thin. So, for our purposes, surgery refers to any bodily manipulation carried out with the intent of fixing some injury or illness. And away we go. The very first surgery that we have historical evidence for dates as far back as 6500 BC. It's called trepanning, which is a nice word for carving someone's frickin' skull open using nothing but a rock. Maybe a rock on a stick if you were lucky. In all seriousness though, you can see that a good deal of care went into the procedure, which lets us know that this isn't just the result of random injury. Many skulls even showed signs of healing around the holes, meaning plenty of the people who underwent this whole thing just got up and went about their day afterwards. Alright, hold on, you say. This all sounds guano insane. No way this was that common of an occurrence. Well, friend, if you've been watching this channel long enough, you should know that if you give human beings the benefit of the doubt, chances are they'll prove you wrong. In fact, so far, over 1,500 trepanned skulls have been dug up all across the globe, from Europe to China and even the Americas. This means that between 5 and 10% of all skulls that we've found from the Neolithic period have had at least one man-made hole scraped into them. To put it this way, based on that data, there's a greater probability of someone born in the late Stone Age having their brain matter exposed by some shaman with a chunk of flint than someone born in the USA being a redhead. To this day, nobody really knows why this was such a common practice, but most theories tend to revolve around the idea of releasing some kind of dark supernatural force from the patient. Man, I'm getting real sick of all these evil entities infecting our minds and bodies. Huh, you can say that again. I tell you, I need these demons like I need a hole in the head.
No, wait. Fast forward to 600 BC. Over in India, there lived a guy called Maharshi Susruta. Now, this guy was a medical mastermind. He wrote a treatise known as Susruta Samhita, which described countless different conditions, treatments, and yes, even surgeries. One of which is the first recorded instance of rhinoplasty. That means nose job. A hornbill's a type of bird. I'm here too. Anyway, here's how it's done according to Susruta. First, you get them plastered, obviously. Second, you use a leaf to measure out the part of the nose you want fixed. Then, you use the leaf to cut off a flap of skin from the cheek or forehead of the patient. This part's important though. You gotta remember to leave a little piece of it still attached. Otherwise, you just got a chunk of dirty dead face meat on your hands. Now, wherever you're looking to stick the new flesh on, you rub that part raw with a knife. Also, you're gonna want to stick 2 plant stalks in their nostrils so their nose keeps its proper shape. Slap the skin on, suture it, dust it with licorice powder for some reason, and cover it with cotton. Sesame oil should be regularly applied until the skin is fully healed. If you're like me, I already do that by default, so it shouldn't be an issue. Finally, at long last, your sniffer is reborn. Don't worry, you still look like a freak. Just slightly less so. Moving on, our next surgery took place in 10th century Spain on Sancho I of Leon, otherwise known as Sancho the Fat. Now, normally, back in the day, having some meat on your bones was a sign of wealth and power and all that, but this guy was like TLC documentary tier, to the point where he could hardly function as a human being. So his constituents said, "Greetings, your thickness. Yeah, you can't be king anymore on account of you keep breaking every horse we give you, and nobody wants to wash between your accordion-like neck folds no more." After his adipose got him deposed, Sancho decided to seek medical help for his condition, under the oversight of well-reputed physician Hasdai ibn Shaprut, which is an anagram for paintbrush aids. Now, if there's one thing that medieval man understood, it's practicality. Lap band, gastric bypass, belly balloon, these all exist to help people who don't have the self-control to stop eating so much on their own. But Dr. Chapadout didn't believe in beating around the bush. He said, well, why don't we just stop the patient from shoving food into his own greasy maw in the first place? And decided to just up and stitch the dude's lips together. After the operation, the only nutrients that Sancho received came through a straw, in the form of a mixture known as thoriaca, which was a complex blend of several herbs, fruits, and seeds, including opium. It was basically the closest thing you could find to lean at the time, and lean he became, losing around half his weight before ascending to the throne once more. So this is the part of the video where I pander to the desires of the audience. If there's one thing I know you internet people can't get enough of, it's things going inside people's eyeballs. Let's talk about cataract surgery. The art of dealing with people's clouded lenses has been around for millennia, believe it or not. That Susruta guy from earlier actually talked about the most common procedure for cataracts for most of civilized history, which is known as the couching method. Couching is done by taking a sharp object like a needle or a thorn, and ever so gently stabbing their eye hole at weird angles until the lens moves out of the way. No lasers, no sedatives, no paralytics, just a rusty old pin and some elbow grease, the way God intended. The majority of the time, this operation didn't work, usually just damaging the already blind eye irreparably. Shocker, right? And even if it did go as planned, you still, didn't have a lens in your eye, so you essentially went from, I can't tell if I'm dead or not, to, ah yes, it is quite yellow out today. By God. Something moved somewhere. A slightly more refined version of this operation is the suction method, which dates back to at least the 10th century AD, if not older. This procedure is described as requiring, quote, a large incision in the eye, a hollow needle, and an assistant with an extraordinary lung capacity. Though this reads like the setup to the world's most horrifying party trick, it's actually the bare minimum number of tools needed to completely extract the lens from the eye. In case you didn't pick up on how, here's a diagram. This method generally saw a greater success rate and fewer complications than its non-extracting counterpart. So hopefully you can sleep well tonight knowing that the number of human beings who have sucked a piece of somebody's living eyeball through a straw is above zero. Anywho, let's all just be thankful that we live in an era where procedures like these are a thing of the past. Now remember kids, even though the surgeries I described here do sound pretty easy to pull off, please don't try them at home. But if you do, please put it on LiveLeak afterwards. But you know what you can do at home?
Learn stuff about things with Brilliant.org. Brilliant's elegant UI and step-by-step design makes learning seemingly complex topics very intuitive, especially for visual learners like me. Don't think you can understand special relativity? With Brilliant, I bet you can. I'm just some kid in a room somewhere, and even I got the basics. Check this out. Relativistic laser tag. Don't tell me that doesn't sound fun. Then later when you're talking to your friends, you can be like, yeah, I'm taking a course in special relativity right now. No big deal. Maybe gonna hit quantum objects in a couple weeks. So to support me and broaden your understanding of math and science, go to brilliant.org/salmonella and sign up for free. Also, the first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription.
As far as living things go, humans win, not even a contest. But it turns out if you hop to the next genome over and look real carefully, you can actually see a basic version of a lot of the stuff that makes us so great. Here's some stories about what chimpanzees can get down to in the right context. Talking about chimp tales. Now, North Korea's Pyongyang Central Zoo has a colorful history, from its humble beginnings as literally just 50 badgers in a fence, to the parrot they taught to recite poetry praising Kim Il-sung, to being the only place in Pyongyang where you can look at a dog legally. It seems the only thing that's remained constant throughout this zoo's life is that it's fucking depressing. Fortunately, both workers and animals alike found ways to cope, one of which is smoking. Azalea the chimp is currently 13 years old and is one of the shining stars of Pyongyang Zoo, purely for her ability to burn through over a pack a day. Now, I like a good old-fashioned smoking chimp as much as the next guy, but whereas most zookeepers would probably try to talk her out of something so unhealthy, the North Korean ones actually gave her supplies, just like, feeling trapped, welcome to the club, pal. Her skills are actually pretty impressive. Not only can she use a lighter, but in a pinch, she also knows the old schoolyard trick of lighting one ciggy with the other. Just a shame that her mind wasn't put towards something a little more healthy or productive. Nah, you know what? That's pretty dope, actually. I'm happy with that. Flashback to 1954. A chimp named Congo was born in the London Zoo. Little did anybody know, this ape was a prodigy. Out of curiosity, one of his zookeepers, named Desmond Morris, decided to give Congo a pencil and a piece of cardboard to see what he'd do. Almost immediately, he started drawing some rudimentary lines and shapes. Morris was like, whoa, and decided to let him try painting on for size. And what he saw was incredible. Congo created these beautiful renderings with a blend of realism and self-expression that would make even the great masters stare in awe. Nah, just fucking with you, they're garbage. But for a non-human, there's still something to be appreciated here. Congo had at least a very basic sense of composition. Like, you can see there's some balance to the images. Matter of fact, when his handler would make shapes on one side of the page, Congo would deliberately mark up the other side to maintain some kind of symmetry. He also had an artist's sense of self-entitlement, because whenever his owner tried to take away a picture before Congo thought it was finished, he'd literally go apeshit, all throwing a fit and screaming till they gave it back. But hey, painting done by a chimp. You know who likes pointless novelties like that? The incredibly rich. In 2005, 3 of Congo's paintings were up for auction next to works by 2 obscure little artists known as Andy Warhol and Pierre-Auguste Renoir. And while the 2 actual artist pieces went completely unsold, these 3 beauties got picked up for the scant price of over $25,000 US. And the guy was like, wow, I felt something for a second there. I really like the watermark on this, by the way. Like, this is my painting done by a chimp. Anyway, next we have this beast called Washoe. Washoe was the first non-human creature to learn to communicate through sign language. That's right, eat shit, Coco. Prior experiments in chimp communication had attempted to teach him some basic spoken language, but after realizing that chimps are physically incapable of making most of the noises we do, they decided signing would be the better option. Washoe was raised in an environment similar to what a human child would experience, complete with toys, clothes, chores, and even being allowed to sit at the dinner table, in spite of what the Bible clearly says about that. The scientists raising Washoe made sure to only communicate in American Sign Language around her, in the hopes of establishing a true conversational rapport. Initially, they took a traditional Pavlovian approach by rewarding proper use of a new sign with food and tickles. But there were a couple problems with this. Firstly, the simple action reward setup meant that Washoe didn't have to really understand the words she was signing, the same way a parrot saying I love you in a YouTube video always does it with those cold, unfeeling eyes. Secondly, Washoe would break into a laughing fit whenever they tickled her, to the point where the lesson would be essentially over. So the researchers abandoned this and instead just let her learn through observation of her caretaker signing, with much better results even in the total absence of reward stimuli. And the only downside was that the job title of designated chimp tickler ceased to exist. In total, Washoe learned around 350 individual signs in ASL, and she'd even use these to formulate novel phrases for new objects. Like one time she wanted to talk about a thermos, but didn't know what a thermos was. She goes, metal cup drink. Hey, scat! A similar story comes from a chimp named Lucy, who was raised by one Dr. Maurice Temerlin and his wife, Jane. The tale of Lucy's life is why this woman is now officially the third most famous woman named Jane who worked with apes. In the same vein as Washoe, the pair attempted to gain some insight into Lucy's weird chimp noggin by raising her like you would a human. You know, dressing herself, using silverware, making tea, looking at magazines, pretending she knows what a word is, all that jazz. But as Lucy matured, things took an ugly turn. For once, as she was brought up in a basically human environment, she eventually discovered the time-tested human pastime of alcohol. The pair would leave bottles of gin around their home with Lucy, which, I don't know how you'd make this mistake twice, but it was apparently a common occurrence for them to leave her alone for too long and come back like, honey, I think the monkey's fucking wasted. Again. Another one of her hobbies was sculpting crude human heads out of poop. Her own poop, to be clear. They also left some copies of Playgirl magazine around for Lucy to flip through, which she became very fond of. So fond, in fact, that she was caught multiple times, having relations with the vacuum cleaner. I don't understand the mechanics of it, cause no source I found ever went into detail, and believe me, I wanted to know as much as you do. All I know is that, all things considered, some pretty exemplary tool use there. So the pair saw this and they were like, alright, we gotta get this chimp laid, and fast. But the problem was, Lucy was conversing with people, eating with people, flicking the old chimp bean to people, so it's not a stretch to think that Lucy thought she was people. So imagine you're people, and you get thrown into an enclosure with a full-grown, horny male chimp. You'd have a fucking panic attack. And that's just what Lucy did. As the years went on, Lucy got more and more violent, regularly trashing the place to get out the frustration of not being able to comprehend what was so fundamentally unnatural about her existence. Finally, the couple had enough and decided to take Lucy to a primate rehabilitation center in the Gambia, with the hopes that she could be forced to acclimate to primate life. She could barely cope with it at first, getting real depressed and hardly associating with the other apes. Which you'd be depressed too if you had to give up a life of American luxury complete with booze and vacuum fornicating to go live with chimps in the wild. But with the help of a graduate student named Janice, Lucy eventually came to accept her fate, and although she'd never mate with another of her kind, she ended up getting along with her troop well enough. About a year after leaving the rehab center, Janice came back to visit, and Lucy gave her a warm embrace before waddling back to the rest of the chimps. Aww. Then Lucy got poached like a fucking egg, which kinda puts a damper on the whole happy ending, but you know. Whatever. So if there's one lesson to be gained from all this, it's that the best way to learn something is to be immersed in it and to make it part of you. While treats are good for making dogs do backflips, true comprehension comes from integrating new things into your daily life. And what better way to do that than with some free audiobooks? Sponsor time! Listening to audiobooks inspires us, motivates us, even brings us closer. And there's no better place to listen than Audible. If you want something kinda like what I do, except actually funny and well informed, you should check out The Infinite Monkey Cage. Think Ricky Gervais show, except half comedians and half actual scientists. It's great. You can get your first audiobook free along with 2 selected Audible original titles when you start your 30-day trial. Just visit audible.com/salmonella or text salmonella to 500-500 to get started. Again, go to audible.com/SAMONELLA or text SAMONELLA to 500-500 to try Audible for free. Link in the description. Hope you had yourself a merry little whatever. I know I did. What do you like best about the holiday experience? My personal favorite part is where we systemically brainwash children into thinking they're supernatural beings who judge their every move and then invade their house at night. Now, everyone knows Santa. Good old Saint Nick. Ol' Father Christmas, ol' Christopher Kringle, ol' Elpheus Prime, slayer of elk and bringer of Xboxes. And you've probably heard of some other characters somewhere too. Guys like Krampus, Belsnickel, Charlie Brown, Xi Jinping. Well, today I want to show you guys some more obscure Yuletide beings from different cultures all across the globe, but mostly Europe. Now, this first creature's name comes from the Welsh. As a matter of moral principle, I personally don't formally recognize the Welsh language. Maybe someday they'll figure out how W's and Y's work, then it'll be a different story, but for the time being, you'll have to excuse me for not condoning bullshit like this. So the thing allegedly called Marilwydd isn't a true mythical creature per se, but more so a tradition carried out for at least the past few centuries in South Wales. No, I mean Old South Wales. This is how it works. Every holiday season, the village rapscallion will take a horse's skull and affix it to the end of a pole. Kinda like one of these things, except, you know, awful. The skull is typically decorated in some way, and sometimes they put in a lever so you can make the mouth move on its own. Then a white sheet is draped over the pole and its holder, thus giving the illusion that Famine himself has come to destroy all your figgy pudding. From here, one would think that the nightly festivities would include welshing your trousers and repenting for a lifetime of naughtiness, but no, it gets better. You know that whole mouth-moving thing? Turns out that's not just for taking wild snaps at the faces of innocent children. The Mari Luid and its party of caretakers will go around to random houses and sing a song about wanting to be let inside. The inhabitants are then expected to sing back with excuses as to why they don't want this abomination in their home. All in rhyme, of course. This goes back and forth until either the Mari Luid gives up, or the party's invited in, at which point they get to raid your pantry and drink all your beer. So if you ever find yourself rap battling a horse skull in South Wales, don't panic. It's normal, I guess. Next we have Frau Perchta, a witch-like being said to visit during the holidays in the Alpine regions of Germany and Austria. Depictions of Perchta can range anywhere between beautiful woman and whatever the hell this is, but usually they fall somewhere in between. She's also sometimes shown with this big weird floppy goose foot. That's because she's apparently real into spinning. Not the 2-foot kind though, the 1-foot kind. It's said that this delightful spinster pays a visit to all the little wiener schnitzels on the 12th night of Christmas. If you were well behaved and hard working this year, she might leave you a small silver coin in your shoe. How kind. But if you've been an inattentive young lady and didn't spin all your flax that year, Perchta will trample all your half-woven fibers as punishment, and you'll say, weird flax, but okay.
Fucking cut that out, Jesus.
Then there's the stuff Perchta considers especially naughty, which can vary depending on who you ask. If you left your house a mess, or you didn't leave out the traditional bowl of porridge, or maybe you didn't eat your ceremonial fish and gruel on feast day, that's when you've been a real goober. As recompense, she'll rip out your fucking intestines through your abdominal wall and then stuff your empty body cavity with pebbles and straw until you're just as plump as when she started. So, you win some, you lose some. Nobody knows what she does with your freshly harvested innards after she leaves. But being that she lives in the mountains and has an obsession with thread making, I think we can all infer the obvious truth. Of course, no discussion of folklore of any kind can truly be complete without taking a look at Iceland. Between the centuries of isolation and the volcanic fumes constantly spilling out over the countryside, it's no wonder that they're one of the world's biggest exporters of whack-ass mythology. Seriously, according to one 1998 survey, over 54% of Icelandic citizens said they believed in elves. Let me repeat that just so we're all clear. In 1998, the majority of the population of Iceland said they believed in elves, and a very large portion probably still does today. As such, the cast of characters said to visit during the holiday season over there is naturally quite diverse. The main lineup consists of the family pictured here. This is the leader of the bunch, a troll, goblin, ogreish type lady named Grilla. Grilla just fucking eats kids. That's it. She's said to prefer the naughty ones, but as long as it's small and made out of kid, she's game. Then you got her husband, Lepalu, who lives with her in her cave, generally considered to be equally ogreish. When the holidays roll around, if there's no soot in your fireplace, he'll reward you with a pickled herring. But if it's dirty, he'll scoop up the ash and dump it in your bed. Ooh. Nah, just messing with you. None of that's true. He also just eats children. The couple also has a giant cat called, this. The cat's main concern is whether or not a person received new clothes for Christmas. Pretty hypocritical considering it walks around naked all the time, but whatever. Anyway, if you got new clothes, then good for you. You got new clothes. On the other hand, if you didn't get any, well, can
you guess what he does? You want to take a wild stab? Yeah, that's exactly right. He fucking eats you. Children, adults, doesn't matter. He'll even vor your dog. He doesn't care.
Finally, you got the best of the bunch, the 13 Yule lads, each of which visits on a different day leading up to Christmas. They're kind of like the 7 dwarves, but whereas those guys are jolly and helpful and stupid shit like that, the only real goal of the Yule lads is to harass and inconvenience people as much as possible, and each one has a unique way that they go about doing that. I'm going to go through all 13. Now please remember, I am making none of this up. I'm not even going to try to say the Icelandic names, so I'll just give you guys the English translations, which are very apt, by the way. First you got Sheepcoat Clod, who goes around harassing sheep, but he's easy to catch on account of his peg legs. Then there's Gully Gulk, who hides in gullies to steal milk from your cows. There's Stubby, he's real short. He eats the leftover crust out of pie pans. This one's called Spoon Licker. He licks spoons. He's also incredibly thin on account of malnutrition for some reason. There's Pot Scraper, he scrapes pots. And Bowl Licker, who's like Spoon Licker. The key difference here being that He licks bowls. You got Door Slammer, who slams doors in the middle of the night. And then Skier Gobbler, who gobbles up all your skier, which is like a Nordic yogurt type thing. Whoa, who's that up in the rafters? It's Sausage Swiper, of course. Here to swipe your sausages. And who's that in the windows? You bet your ass it's Window Peeper. Look at him peep. And who could forget our favorite, Doorway Sniffer, who sniffs your doorway with his giant freakish nose to seek out bread. There's Meat Hook, he steals your meat with a hook. And finally, Candle Stealer, who fucking, you get the picture. So, if you know some kids who just won't behave, maybe it's time to take a page out of Iceland's book come next holiday season. Now remember, your friend dressed up as Grilla doesn't have to actually eat the kids. Just bite him a couple times, that'll be enough. Anyway, with New Year's right around the corner, the time comes to make our New Year's resolutions. While you may spend New Year's Eve getting hella turnt, why not spend New Year's Day getting hella learnt? You can do just that with Skillshare.org. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. Beyond technical skills, there's plenty of lifestyle type stuff on here that'd be perfect for building 2019 you. Check this one out. Beat procrastination once and for all. Maybe if I had taken this course, this video would have been out, before Christmas. Do you speak any other languages? Well, you could. Believe me, I get a lot of joy of shoving my français down other people's throats. If you try one of these guys on for size, you could be doing the same in no time. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my viewers. The first 500 people who visit the link in the description will get 2 months of unlimited access to the 25,000 plus classes on Skillshare for absolutely free. What are you waiting for? Go! Don't just stare at me with your glassy eyes. People are taking them already. Go, hurry, run! Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam.
Us are aware of at least one animal companion to the Commander-in-Chief. All but 3 presidents have owned some kind of pet during their term, and there's good reason for that. Not only does a lovable mutt serve to humanize an otherwise larger-than-life figure, but their cute antics can also be a great distraction when needed. Huh? Drone strikes. Never heard of her. Hey, we're doing a photo op with this dog that shares a name with my vice president's son, cause that's not weird at all. But as it turns out, dogs and cats are just the tip of the iceberg. There have been a lot of quadrupedal occupants of the White House, even without Miss Lewinsky. So today we'll be going through just a few of the more interesting ones. Going back to the beginning, Washington had critters galore, including 4 black and tan slurhounds that he named Drunkard, Taster, Tippler, and Tipsy. They sound like if Santa's reindeer were all alcoholics, which would be a shame because Rudolph's red nose would no longer be of note. John Adams had 3 dogs that presumably spanned the alignment chart, being named Juno, Mark, and Satan respectively. Not a joke. Jefferson kept around 40 sheep during his presidency, one of which was a 4-horned Shetland ram. Though nameless, said ram soon became famous for killing a young boy on White House grounds. Rather than immediately destroying the animal as we'd expect today, Jefferson just had it moved back to Monticello. It was eventually put down, but only after it single-handedly killed several other rams at the estate, which just goes to show how Jefferson operated. Random child, not the best optics, but that can be forgiven. But my own property, that's a bridge too far, Rambo. John Quincy Adams' wife Louisa practiced sericulture, which is a fun word for silkworm keeping. As a side note, sericulture's been going on since at least 3630 BC, which is kinda nutty, cause that means we domesticated worms to turn their goo into clothes before we figured out how to ride a horse. Jackson had an African gray parrot named Poll, short for Polly, that would apparently curse like a sailor, probably thanks to the teachings of Old Hickory himself. Having outlived its owner, Poll ended up being removed from Jackson's funeral service after unleashing so much profanity that guests found it genuinely upsetting. He also kept roosters for cockfighting, which was acceptable at the time and still far from the worst thing he's done morally. During Van Buren's term, the Sultan of Oman sent a variety of gifts to the president, among them being a pair of tiger cubs. He was like, "This is badass," and desperately wanted to keep them in the White House. But the dickheads in Congress asserted that, due to a specific constitutional provision, gifts to the presidential office weren't for the man himself, but for the people. Van Buren said, "Fuck the people, them's my tigers," and got into a legal battle with the legislator over the issue, which he eventually lost. The tigers were subsequently sent to a zoo, and over 20 years later, Van Buren died of pneumonia, completely unrelated to this incident. Although Andrew Johnson had no de jour pets, he did befriend a family
family of mice he found in his bedroom, feeding them flour and grain and referring to them as the little fellows. It's an oddly wholesome thing to hear from someone who essentially set the trajectory for the next 100 years of black disenfranchisement. Mr. Johnson, we still have a country to rebuild. Get out of my room, I'm getting rat-pilled. Taft had 2 cows during his term. The first of them was named Mooly Wooly, and she died a year and a half in after, quote, eating too many oats. Mooly was promptly replaced by the far more dignified Pauline Wayne. She was a real dime of a heifer, which led Taft to show her off at the International Dairymen's Expo in Milwaukee. In order to get her there, she was transported in a private car attached to a train headed for the stockyards in Chicago. But a switch crew mixed up which car was hers, leading to 2 days of frantic telegraphs asking where the president's cow had gone. She only narrowly avoided the slaughterhouse when a couple of attendants at the stockyard recognized Pauline for what she was, and all was well. This next one requires a little background info. So the traditional Thanksgiving dinner was and remains a significant yearly ceremony for the first family. For half a century, from 1873 to 1913, the duty of providing the presidential turkey belonged to one Horace Vose, a private turkey farmer based in Rhode Island. After his death, though, things turned into a free-for-all, with numerous farmers sending unsolicited turkeys, both alive and dead, in an attempt to secure a position as the next annual caterer for the White House. Nobody was decided on for a decade, and upon assuming office in 1923, Calvin Coolidge found the volume of birds showing up at his doorstep alarming, and put an end to the tradition that year, instead opting to buy his own turkey. But in 1925, after much outside pressure, he caved, and was immediately flooded with not only turkey, but a variety of increasingly exotic animals to eat. Among them was a live raccoon he received the following year. Coolidge was, at the time, blissfully unaware of the intricate dance performed on the palate between forward yet ephemeral gaminess and heady seductive musk when one submits himself to the experience of a toothsome raccoon fillet, and as such he decided to keep it as a pet instead. Dubbed Rebecca, the creature soon came to be a core member of the Coolidge family. She ate as well as any of them, being fed things like shrimp and persimmons, and she was particularly fond of eggs. Given free reign over the house, Rebecca's hobbies reportedly included unscrewing light bulbs, uprooting houseplants, and playing with wet bars of soap in the bathtub. She was so beloved that she even had her own treehouse built for her in the White House yard. When the Coolidges made way for the Hoovers, Rebecca was forced to vacate her post, but the new first family soon found that they had a squatter on their hands. The new tenant of Rebecca's treehouse was a wild opossum who, rather than being evicted, was adopted by the Hoovers in a similar fashion to Rebecca, albeit from a farther distance, mostly just saying, yeah, that's ours now. He was given the name Billy Possum, which is a reference to our old friend Taft. See, as the man following Teddy Roosevelt in the White House, Taft had some big shoes to fill. So during his term, some enterprising young dumbasses approached Taft with what they claimed would be the sequel to the teddy bear. They called it Billy Possum, which is itself a reference to the president's fondness of possum and taters, a dish he famously requested at a banquet in Atlanta as an act of goodwill towards the South and its culture. Taft found the idea amusing enough that he gave the green light, and many thousands of Billy Possums were produced. Given their total obscurity today, it's clear these toys were a massive flop, and there's a few reasons for that. For one, trying to force fads at all is like trying to push water uphill, but also, the story of Roosevelt refusing to shoot a tied-up bear has a bit more symbolic poetry to it than, it's a possum cause he like possum, he a fat boy, eat him up good. Couple that with the constant character assassination that the opossum as an animal has received from ignorant urbanites, and it becomes obvious that this thing was doomed from the start. But anyway, that's where the Hoover opossum got his name, and his exploits were pretty limited outside of temporarily filling in as a mascot of a local high school. In 1961, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev gifted a dog to the Kennedys, named Pushinka, or Fluffy. And while it is normally rude to look a gift dog in the mouth, an exception can be made when the single biggest threat to the free world insists that said dog should live with the president. Pushinka was x-rayed, put through metal detectors, and given ultrasounds out of fear that someone implanted her with a listening device. Fortunately, though there may be bugs in some of you mugs, there ain't no bugs in she, and Pushinka remained a Kennedy for the rest of her days. While truthfully, the gift was likely given as a simple act of good faith designed to reduce Cold War tensions, Pushinka was also the daughter of Strelka, who, during Sputnik 5, became the first mammal to make it back from space alive. So I'd like to think of it as more of a passive-aggressive space race flex. Like, yeah, our astronanimals are so alive, they're making babies even. Hope looking at this one constantly reminds you of
I'll be teaching you how to read these things. The symbol is technically known as NFPA 704, but nobody really calls it that. Most people refer to it as a fire diamond or a safety square, Or if you're British, a figmenty pigmenty crosser tosser, whatever floats your boat. Anyway, when you see the symbol, usually on a door or a container or something, it means there's a hazardous material present. And the numbers and symbols on the diamond give information on exactly how dangerous that material is. So first off, notice the 4 colors, right? Each one represents a different type of hazard. Red is for flammability because fire and burning things are usually red. Yellow is for chemical reactivity, I guess because chemical reactions involve swapping electrons and electricity is yellow, sure. Blue is for health hazards because fuck you. And then white is just extra space for other stuff. So the 3 colored diamonds, or if you want to be politically correct, the African American diamonds, each have a number from 0 to 4. And each of these is like a threat level for that category. If the number is 0, it basically means you'd have to be some kind of professional to manage to fuck things up in that fashion. Sand, for example, has a 0 in its flammability. The only time sand burns is when it's wedged in the cracks of your Speedo for too long. However, please note that the health section does not apply to ingestion. For example, motor oil has a blue rating of 0, but that in no way makes it safe to drink. If the number is 1, that means there's a threat present, but you'd still have to be like an advanced level dumbass in order to really find it. Cellulose, the primary chemical found in paper, has a flammability of 1, so don't, hold it over a fire for a while, and you'll be fine. 2 is where things start being kind of a big deal. Capsaicin, the chemical that makes peppers spicy, has a health risk of 2. You finish chopping your jalapenos, and then you go touching your jalapenis. It's not gonna kill you or nothing, but it's gonna mess your day up for sure. If you see a 3, that's when you know you gotta watch out. Gasoline, it's got a flammability of 3, and we all know gasoline. You see gasoline walking by, you better take the cigarette out of your mouth, get the static off your clothes, fix your hair, make yourself presentable, don't make eye contact. That's the only way to keep yourself safe. And then 4 is the highest number on the scale. If you see a 4, the best thing to do is just start walking backwards, because if you're close enough to read that 4, chances are you're not where you need to be. Nitroglycerin has a reactivity of 4. If you soak a tissue in nitroglycerin and give it to your friend to sneeze in, that sneeze will result in his entire goddamn face getting blown off. So yeah, 4s are nothing to sneeze at. Literally. Now let's move on to the bottom bit. Unlike me, this diamond isn't just a big white waste of space. This is the spot for any extra warnings you need to know about. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, like radiation, or biohazard, or gaze, so I'll just go through a few that aren't as easy to interpret. Take a look at this one. Unless you hear faint mooing while you're reading it, chances are it doesn't mean what you think. OX is short for oxidizer, which is basically something that produces oxygen when exposed to heat. This doesn't sound so bad until you realize that heat plus oxygen rarely ends well for most fuels in the vicinity. If you see this one, it means white people aren't allowed to touch the material. Just kidding. White people are allowed to do whatever they want. It actually means don't mix with water, or else it could explode or multiply or something. Ese means simple asphyxiant, referring to gases like helium. It basically means that while this gas isn't poisonous, it's also, not air. So if you breathe it for too long, you will still die. Alright kids, so now that you know all the ins and outs of these things, let me give you a little quiz. On the left we got a bunch of things, and on the right we have a bunch of fire diamonds. Pause the video now and see if you can match them up correctly. All done? Here are the answers. So now you know all about NFPA.
Kids, whenever I browse this site, I see more and more videos of people talking about things like YouTuber drama, the election, world politics, and it made me think, hey, maybe I should start covering more relevant, nuanced topics in my videos. Anyway, let's talk about chickens. So the story of the chicken begins a long time ago in Southeast Asia. Now, this area had a ton of bamboo growing all over the place. And the thing about bamboo is it follows a very specific life cycle, where once every 50 years or so, every bamboo plant in a given region will blossom at the exact same time. Then, shortly after, they litter the whole area with these little seeds known as bamboo rice, or as I call them, bambinos. These pellets get planted, the current bamboo dies out, and the cycle starts over. Now, enter the ancestor of the domesticated chicken, known as the red jungle fowl. The jungle fowl lived in the same area as the bamboo, and, as you can imagine, they got a lot of benefit out of being literally knee-deep in food once every half-century. So much so that evolution basically said, alright, when food supplies go up, I want you to just start pumping out babies like there's no tomorrow. That way, we can take as much advantage of each bloom as possible. As a result, the chicken population became synchronized with the bamboo, shooting up during blooms and dwindling in between. Then humans showed up and they saw this pattern, and they said, wow, how bamboozling. And then they realized, wait a minute, that pun was dumb.
But also, we can harness this whole chicken cycle thing. All we have to do is give these guys a whole bunch of food, and we can make their reproductive systems go into overdrive whenever we want. Do you know what that means? Lots of hot bird porn. No, it means we get as many eggs as we could ever dream of. So, with a bit of work, we managed to domesticate the chicken around 5000 BC. And as you can imagine, the idea of having a literal egg-laying machine around the house was extremely popular, leading to the chicken spreading across the entirety of the civilized world over the course of a few millennia. I think it's interesting that, despite the fact that the West has had chickens for most of its history, it wasn't until way later that we figured out where they came from. Like, alright men, it's time to delve into the world of the unknown. We're gonna see things the likes of which man has never laid eyes upon before. But, if you keep your wits about you, we just might make it out of here alive. Hey, is this yours? No? Weird. What the hell? Of course, having a constantly supercharged uterus is not without its drawbacks. After all, the chicken essentially goes through its entire menstrual cycle every day. So next time your girlfriend's complaining about how bad her period is, get her a box of chocolates and be generally attentive to her needs. You prick. Anyway, one thing with chickens and most other egg-laying critters is that they only have one hole in their pelvic region, which is called a cloaca, I think. Or cloaca. Cloaca? So the Croatia basically acts like a funnel, taking all the eggs and waste and sending it down the same chute. And while this might sound convenient at first, there is one fatal disadvantage that affects chickens in particular. Sometimes the egg can get stuck on its way out, leading to a condition known as egg binding. And since this means nothing can exit the clamato anymore, the egg-bound chicken ends up dying of constipation over the course of a couple days. Hey Jerry, how you doing? Not good, Sean. Not good. Oh man, what's wrong? It's just, ever since Jenny got egg-bound, things have been so stressful. Her funeral expenses are through the roof, and her memory means so much to me, but if the bills keep coming in like this, I'm not sure my family will be able to handle it. Well, hey man, you know what they say, don't put all your eggs in one casket. Let's just hope she doesn't get egg-zoomed. I'm sorry. Don't ever contact me or my kids ever again. I understand. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam Manella, and thank you for watching.